a human soul reincarnated into the alternate universe world of the Lion King. He was reborn as the twin brother of the crowned prince Simba. He was forced to survive in a brutal version of Disney World, where the weak are hunted, mercy is rare, and strength is the only law that rules. Amid the roar of fallen kings, Leo carved his path as a force of nature. He was renowned for his strength, dominance, kingdom, pride, and achievements. But most of all, he was known as the true Lion King, for he was not a born king but a forged king. Through trials, setbacks, loss, pain, and blood, he only emerged stronger. Hello there, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Simba's Twin, the Lion King, Part 1. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
The night surrendered to morning. The first golden rays of the sun penetrated the fleeting darkness that covered the Pride Lands. A gentle breeze stirred the tall grass, carrying the fresh scent of dawn across the vast savanna. The distant silhouette of Pride Rock stood bathed in the warm glow of sunrise, casting a long shadow over the awakening kingdom. It was a morning unlike any other, and the land seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of this historic day. Herds of antelope and wildebeest lifted their heads toward the sky, sensing the arrival of something momentous. Birds fluttered from their nests, their calls blending into a chorus of nature's reverence. Elephants swayed their trunks, and giraffes stretched their long necks toward the endless sheet of blue as if paying homage to the sun. Guided by an unspoken command, the animals began to move, converging from every corner of the Pride Lands. Life stirred. Life gathered. Life moved toward Pride Rock. The Lion King Mufasa was there to greet the gathering beasts. He stood at the edge of Pride Rock in all his golden glory. Rafiki, the old mandrill, climbed the rocky path toward him. His staff clicked softly against the rock as he held a lion cup with one hand. The future king. Mufasa inclined his head slightly to acknowledge his old friend. Then his eyes went to the cub in the monkey's arm. The cub blinked open his tiny amber eyes, looked at his father, and then took in the world around him. He tilted his head curiously, unaware of the destiny that awaited him. A whisper of wind passed through the Pride Lands as if to bless the lion cub. A new soul found its place in the circle of life. Rafiki lifted the cub above his head to show to the world below, and the animals bellowed a welcome to the future king. It was the sound of respect and celebration. The earth trembled under the vibration. It was a magical sight, straight out of a storybook. And I got to witness it all from behind, inside the den of the Pride Rocks. Look at that. Your brother is the crowned prince of the Pride Lands. You must always stand beside him while he fulfills his destiny, Sarabi, the Lion Queen, said while gazing at the scene. Do you understand, Leo? She softly shoved me with her nose. I answered by releasing a tiny sound from my throat. I sounded more like a house cat than a real lion at the moment. Indeed, my name is Leo, the twin brother of the crowned prince Simba. You must be wondering how I got here. Good. Keep wondering. Because even I have absolutely no idea how I got here. 2 months later. I was just some dude on his way to finish high school before I found myself in this precarious situation. There was nothing extraordinary about me except that I got good grades, was taller than most, and was rejected thrice by the same girl. Because of that, I struggled at first to understand why I, out of all people, was dealt with this fate. Perhaps the reincarnation part was a good thing as it gave me a second chance, but the part where I became a flippin' lion? That part was not cool. Wait, I'm not in school anymore so I can curse. Let's do that again. But the part where I became a lion? That part was not cool. It could be worse though, at least I was born an animal known as the king of the jungle. Imagine I was born as a worm instead. That was my mentality after 2 months had passed. Sometimes good and bad were just a different perspective away. There is always a silver lining to a situation. Not for worms though. What the hell is good about being a worm? During these months, I had gotten a general idea of the situation I found myself in. I was reborn as a lion, the twin brother of the famous lion Simba. And yes, I was reborn in our childhood movie, The Lion King, except this was no longer Disney or a simple cartoon. It was very real and followed real-life logic. The similarity between the movie and this world ends with a story. For instance, I was the twin brother of Simba. And unlike what the kids' movie would have you believe, lionesses do not give birth to only one cub at a time. It could range from 2 to 6 cubs in one pregnancy. Imagine they only gave birth to 1 cub at a time. They would be extinct as a species already, since only 1 cub out of 8 survived in nature. There were also things not shown in the movie, like the situation I found myself in at the moment. Grr! I all but growled as mean as I could towards Mufasa while he was attempting to mount my mother. I wouldn't give a second glance at them mating if not for the fact that I was feeding on her milk. I dug my sharp little claws at his limb closest to me, but that did nothing to his tough hide. So I had to let go of the nipple in my mouth and use my growing teeth to clamp down on his leg. He raised an eyebrow and lifted his paw. I was lifted up from the ground as well, since I did not let go of my bite. Grrrrrrrrrr. I growled once more when we locked eyes. If he wanted some pussy, he could get them later. Not while I was feeding. They always ended up crushing me with their body, not to mention it was disgusting. Feeding time was sacred. Just let him go, you know he doesn't like you doing it while he is feeding, Sarabi said. She bit my nape and my body froze on instinct, and I released the bite I had on my father. She then proceeded to drop me gently beside her once more. Sarabi, I am king, Mufasa scoffed. I know you are, my king. But how about you go to some other lioness for now? I will be all yours after I feed little Leo, Sarabi said and nudged him with her nose. Fine, Mufasa said while replying to her affection. You are the queen, and off he went, leaving me to feed in peace. He did not even have to look for females, as 2 lionesses immediately came to him, flicking their tails around his neck in all but invitation. A king had options, must be nice. Or not, I was not awfully interested in female lions. That could change though when I became older. I was not under the delusion that my human mind and memory would be able to suppress the instincts of my body. I was a lion now, and I've accepted that, including everything that came along with being a lion. The pride consisted of 9 lionesses and 7 young cubs, including me. All of us were under the rule of Mufasa and Mufasa alone. His brother Scar was an outsider. He was not a part of our pride. That meant all the lionesses and even the cubs belonged to Mufasa. That was how a lion pride works. If you really thought about it, and I've done a lot of thinking, Nala and Simba were half-siblings. That was my first reaction too, before my childhood was ruined. Are you happy now? You are probably the only cub to deny a king, Sarabi cooed while I continued feeding. I just closed my eyes, content. Feeding time was sacred. It was a way for me to get stronger and bigger. And with the future that awaited me, I knew I had to be big and strong, fast. Since I was already a lion, you better believe I was going to be the biggest and strongest lion that ever lived. So even though I was no longer hungry, I continued sucking greedily at the milk. I had no intention of leaving some for Simba. He could get his share from the other lionesses. Okay, that is quite enough. If you drank more you might explode, Sarabi said and shoved me away from her stomach. She was telling the truth. I nearly vomited as she pushed me away. I felt heavy and bloated. It might be uncomfortable, but the feeling left a sense of satisfaction in me. I walked to a safe corner inside the den and began napping immediately. I trusted the bulk. 1 month later. Here's another thing they wouldn't show you in the movies. The antelope released strangled screams of agony while 2 lionesses dragged him towards the open ground where we stood waiting. The sound of his scream came with a wet sound of blood filling his voice box as one of the lionesses had her jaws clamped on his neck. When they reached us, contrary to my expectation, they did not start eating him. Instead, they just left him there to struggle in vain on the ground. The cubs, including me, titled our heads at the dying animal. Today was to be the first time we had real meat, so we did not know how any of this worked. But we watched and we observed. Mufasa came in front and the other lionesses took a step back to give him space. He leapt to the antelope with a beastly roar that made me flinch. He landed the finishing blow. His giant maw clamped down on the neck, and where the lionesses could only strangle, his bite broke the neck in an instant. My ears twitched. No, the bone was completely crushed under his teeth. The antelope died in an instant. Mufasa proceeded to flick his head and the entire head of the antelope came right off. Red blood, so red they looked black, spilled out like a fountain from a major artery. The sight was gore no one could prepare me for. And then Mufasa started tearing the antelope apart and began eating him alone. No one moved, even my mother. We just stayed and watched as the king ate his share. Mufasa tore open the stomach and began feasting on the soft tissues, the heart, the lungs, the livers, and all the nutritious bits. He devoted them all. Sarabi was the first to take a step closer to the food, but she got a low growl from Mufasa. She froze and waited a bit. Her ears were droopy, and she slowly made her way towards the food. But when she got to the meat, her behavior changed, and she became like a beast too. They began devouring the meat while the rest of us watched, and that was when it hit me. In a lion pride, eating was more than just that, eating. It was also a stage to display power and rank. The king ate first, followed by his queen. And just like I expected, the two lionesses who caught the prey went next. For lions ate the food, and then the number slowly increased. The hierarchy of pride decides when the lions get to eat. It was brutal, but there was a weird sense of order behind such brutality. Not just when, but the way they ate show rank and dominance. The king ate the best parts, the organs and the meaty parts. The healthy hunters and queens ate the legs and the muscle-rich meat. Sometimes, Sarabi would shove the other lionesses to get more. There was also a lot of growling, and even a few of them fought for more share. The process was wild and chaotic. Going by the same logic, it meant that we the cubs were the last to eat. We all sat there, watching as all the adults had their share of the antelope. I took the chance to learn about the dominance of each member of the pride. After an hour or so, the adults left the food one by one. They've had their fill, and only then did we move towards the food. The smell of blood and raw meat hit my nose, but they smelled wonderful. I salivated immediately. After I became a lion, what was considered smelly and unpleasant completely changed. A human nose was fundamentally different from that of a lion. I saw a piece of meat covered in sand. I hesitated, but only for a few seconds before I ate it. And then something happened. Instincts I did not even know I had started screaming deep inside me. More. I need more. Driven by pure instincts and newfound hunger, I started to eat the leftovers of the antelope. And that was where it began as well, the hierarchy between us 7 cubs. We fought for the food, just like the adults had. It was a primal feeling, almost out of my control. The results of my bulk immediately showed. I was bigger, stronger, and healthier than the other cubs. I dominated them and got the most amount of meat from whatever was left. It was an enlightening experience, one that made me closer to being a lion and further from being a human. The life of a lion was harsher and more brutal than what the kids' movie could ever prepare me for. The pride was a family, but even within the family, I learned there was no fairness. Nature was merciless. It was survival of the fittest. That didn't scare me though, that didn't demotivate me. Instead, the opposite happened to me. I've seen it today. I wanted to be like my father. I wanted to be like Mufasa, strong, powerful and dominant. I bit at the young cub that was eating a rib with quite a few meats on it. He tried to fight back on instinct, but the pain of my bite quickly discouraged him. He released a whimper, something like a puppy nose, and moved away from his share. I took his food with not an ounce of guilt. I was done accepting my new reality as a lion. Now it was time to give purpose to this life of mine. It felt natural for me to want this, like it was imprinted on my instincts. Perhaps it was my destiny all along. I wanted to be a lion king. 3 months later. Time passed quickly in the life of a lion cub. I was starting to forget what it was like to be human and had completely adapted to my new life as a lion. It has been 6 months, half a year since I took my first breath in this new life. My life consisted of 3 things: feeding, playing, and then sleeping. I spent my days cycling between these 3 activities. It might sound boring to privileged humans, but I knew it was the best time in an animal's life. I spent most of my time sleeping, which is the main reason why time passed so quickly. As a cub, I was still growing, and sleeping was when I grew, apparently. I would eat as much as I could, mixing my mother's milk with any available meat. Playing time was also an important factor in my life, as it was how we cubs learned and trained for everything we'll face as adults. I used it to get accustomed to my lion body and to train my growing muscles. I was known as the roughest and most active cub in the pride. Since I had a clear goal in my mind, I did not play merely for as long as it was fun. Just like how I went extra in feeding, the same goes for playing. A hierarchy soon developed among the 7 of us cubs from our play fighting and feeding time. Of course, I was the most dominant and also the largest cub. Nala was second, followed by Simba. Most of the cubs were 6 months old now, meaning that we were at the end of our weaning phase. I tried to insist on feeding on my mother's milk, but she would roughly shove me away and tell me no these days. It was tragic. I lost a great source of protein and nutrients, which means I would have to fight for even more meat to make up for it. Leo, 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 Elio. I spared a glance at Simba, who was jumping up and down on the ground while I rested on top of a tree branch near the Pride Rocks. You're awake. I knew you were awake, Simba said, completely ignoring the logical conclusion that he just woke me up. I closed my eyes again, easily ignoring his voice while trying to get back to sleep. I've slept through Sarabi and Mufasa's constant grunting as they mate, so I could sleep through his tiny calls. Don't ignore me. You can't ignore me, I'm your brother, he said, and then he tried a few other things to get my attention but none of them worked. He went silent after a while, and then I heard the sound of tiny claws scratching wood. That finally piqued my interest enough to give him another look. I saw Simba trying to climb the tree with all his effort, but he remained stagnant a few inches off the ground. He was not strong enough to pull himself up, nor was he coordinated enough to climb a tree. I watched him fall back on the ground with amusement. Arg! How can you climb such a tall tree? It's so annoying, he said while getting back up. He rubbed his claws on the tree to relieve the strain from trying to climb. What do you want, Simba? I want another match, Leo. I want to fight you again for the title of the strongest cub in the pride, he said with determination in his voice. This again? I sighed. Have Nala heard about this? Did you even beat her yet? Nala is a female. She can't be a king. Aren't you ashamed of bringing her up when it's between you and me? He said shamelessly. He was talking like Nala was not the second strongest, and I was using her as a shield to avoid a fight. I will fight you on one condition. You will give me the next meat Father Dearest gives to you, I said. Although Simba and I were brothers, there was clear favoritism between us. Mufasa went as far as stashing away meat and giving it to Simba when he learned that he was not the most dominant during feeding time. Deal, he said without a thought. And so in the name of food, I got up and leapt off the tree after stretching my limbs. I landed on the ground with a soft thud, displaying impeccable coordination and balance. Any other cub would have died from falling from such a height. When I stood beside Simba, the difference in our size became clear. I was not too tall nor too wide compared to him, but I was much, much thicker. My frame, which was limited by my genes, was filled to the brim with fats and developing muscles. At only half a year, I had muscles big enough to create definition like most adults have. My skin was tight around my body. When I landed, Simba flinched back. That was almost the same as admitting defeat before the match even started. Simba had a heart. He wanted to be brave and strong, but he was not quite there yet. He bared his growing teeth at me and then proceeded to pounce. He stood on his hind legs and swung his paws at me like he had seen the adults do when they fight. I did the same but with half the effort. I was strong and heavier, so I was able to suppress him each time he stood up. In the end, I put my weight on top of him and pressed him to the ground. Okay. I give up. Simba said with a muffled voice, you win. Earning food had never been easier. I pulled back from Simba and finally bared my teeth at him. But mine was a grin. I don't understand why you are so persistent, Simba. Aren't you tired of losing? My father said it doesn't matter how much I lose, it only matters that I win in the end, Simba said while getting up. He shook his body to remove dust and dried grass from his fur. But you'll never win. Your failure will have no end and it will matter, I said. Oh, but I will. Just wait, I will grow into a super powerful lion like my dad and you will grow up to be like Uncle Scar since you like to be with him so much, Simba said with a challenging tone. You don't grow into strength, Simba, it is earned, I said. I think you missed that. I turned around and slowly walked away. A yawn escaped my maw. The little scuffle had managed to snuff out my drowsiness. Now I had to find something to do. Well, I'll be the king in the future and you will have to listen to me anyway, I heard Simba mutter to himself. Welp, he was young and still naive. He would learn in time. Life was going to teach him the hard way. But I still felt the need to reply. You'll be the king only until I challenge you for it, I said as I walked away, "Be ready, Simba." The challenge hung in the air, leaving him in a silent tension. On the other hand, I made my way towards the den. I walked up the rugged mountain filled with rocks that were still too big for my size. I had to jump from one rock to another to walk up to the den. When I went inside, I was greeted with the unexpected sight of a Scar biting at the leftovers of our last meal. It was mostly just fresh bones with barely any meat left on them. I made sure of that. I looked around the den and saw that no one else was there. I focused on my ears after that, searching for the nearest adult because I sure as hell was not comfortable being alone with Scar. Luckily, I heard the sounds of the other cubs and 2 lionesses just outside the den. The rest of the pride seemed to be out hunting. From the way so many went out to hunt, it seemed we might be eating a buffalo tonight. That was something I looked forward to. I focused back on Scar. His eyes were studying me with a dangerous glint while an amused smile hung just below them. He seemed to know exactly what I just did and was rather impressed by it. "Cautious little thing, you don't think your own uncle would ever harm you, do you?" he asked, and then with a snap, he crushed the femur bone of the dead prey. I deadpanned at him. I didn't just think, I know for a fact that he would kill me just out of spite if he ever got the chance. The lion Scar was a bit different from how he was portrayed in the animated movie. His frame was tall and wide. He was almost as big as Mufasa in this regard. But he was gaunt. His muscles were shadows of what they used to be, stretched thin by hunger. His dark mane hung in tangled strands, unkempt and wild, framing a scarred face with sharp angles. You could tell at a glance that it had been a while since he had a full meal. His ribs were showing through his thin hide. Unlike what most people would think, Scar was not a part of the pride. He was a lone male lion that lived near us. Mufasa had allowed him to live in his territory out of mercy and because Scar had been very submissive so far. Scar's living conditions could only be described as pitiful. He had no access to the females, so he could never pass down his genes. He could not hunt for himself since Mufasa rarely allowed him to. The Lion King had this whole cycle of life philosophy, and he preached that we should only hunt what we need and nothing more. But I believe that was just a guise to make sure Scar never became a strong challenger again. How could Scar hope to challenge him again when he was this weak from lack of food? The only food he got was leftovers most of the time. I was not justifying his action, but I could totally see why Scar would hate Mufasa and even kill him in the end. He was kind of an asshole. But nature was such that might make it right. Mufasa was stronger, so he was the good guy. "Can I try?" I asked when I saw him lapping at the red, yellow bone marrow inside the femur. "Trying to take from a beggar scavenging scraps? I guess we are lucky your brother is the crown prince and not you," he said. "You would make for a selfish king." But in the end, he gestured with his head at me. "Come along and have a taste if you want." I quickly went up to him and without any hesitation, I tried the bone marrow right beneath his maw. He seemed pleasantly surprised at how I was so unafraid of him, not knowing whether to appreciate it or take it as an insult. Most cubs would not even go an inch near him. His reputation was shit and every mother feared that he would kill one of the cubs out of spite, so they told us to stay away from him. "No wonder you are able to live on scraps. That is really fat and juicy," I said while licking my own mouth to clean it. The bone marrow was oily as hell with a hint of blood in them. I was sure it was rich in calories. It was food that could sustain life but not strengthen it when eaten alone. I only ate slightly too more than I was supposed to. There was still plenty for Scar to enjoy. "I wish I had a stronger jaw to be able to crack open bones like you," I said, to which he just chuckled darkly. Perhaps he realized that the moment I was able, he wouldn't even get scraps anymore. "You will get there soon, especially at the speed you are growing. Soon enough, you would outgrow even me," he said. "Tell you what, Uncle Scar. How about instead of waiting for the other lions to leave the den, I bring the remaining bones of every meal to you," I suggested. "And then you can crack open the bones and we can share the bone marrow." He went silent for a moment before he grinned. "Isn't that a splendid idea? Perhaps you would make for a wise king, although selfish, so that's a yes." I asked. "I wouldn't reject if you come once in a while," he said, choosing his words carefully. He didn't want to expect anything good from anyone anymore. He was done with that long ago. Scar remained in the den for a few more hours. He only left when he heard the roars of the other lions that declared their return and a successful hunt. And much to my joy, they brought home a dead buffalo. The feast was official. I opened my eyes, My consciousness was ripped out from the dreamscape by the malicious vibration that filled the air. I knew exactly what it was, so I slipped out of Sarabi's warm hold and ran out of the den. I climbed up the stony passage of the Pride Rocks and gazed out at the rising sun. The chill of the morning air sent goosebumps through my skin, causing my fur to puff out to protect my body heat. My ears darted in every direction, waiting expectantly for another one to come. And it came, in all the glory that I was expecting. Roar. Mufasa, the Lion King's roar could be heard throughout the Pride Lands. It began as a low, guttural rumble like the earth itself was clearing its throat. Then it climbed until it became this mighty, malicious roar that tore through the stillness of the morning air. My sharp ears listened to the roar carefully. The rumble of vibration told me much. With just his roar, I could almost hear Mufasa's size, age, health, and power. The roar rolled across the Pride Lands, echoing from stone to tree as the mountains caught it and hurled it back. The wind carried it to the farthest corners of the kingdom. Birds took flight, and the grass bowed. Prey animals froze in reverence and fear, and predators paused and held their breath at the roar of the apex. I never understood its significance as a human, but as a lion cub, I knew what the roar meant. It was like a command, a decree written in thunder. A warning to all outsiders and challengers. A reminder for everyone who was the one true king. In my heart, it was simply the coolest shit I've ever heard. I just couldn't wait to become an adult and fight to be king as well. Perhaps it was in my blood, but my desire was almost too much. It was unbearable. Roar. The distant roar continued until the sun fully rose on the horizon. It was a routine for Mufasa to patrol his territory in the morning and in the evening. More than once, I tried to imitate Mufasa and release a roar of my own. But my vocal cords were still too young, so what came out were only pitiful growls that sounded like they came from an angry cat instead of a lion. Growl. Stop doing that, Leo, you might hurt your throat. Serafina said while coming up from behind me. She was one of the most dominant females in the Pride alongside my mother, Sarabi. She gave me a rough lick on my head and teased me with her tail while she walked past me. She was one of the early birds in the Pride and liked going to the watering hole to drink and refresh after she woke up. As I was contemplating joining her at the watering hole, her daughter pounced at me from behind. A small jaw clamped down on my scruff, and needle-like claws pricked my skin. Nala. I released an annoyed growl and shook my body to try to get her off my back. But with each second, she anchored herself better and better on me. I heard she followed her mother in their hunt for buffalo. This must be something she learned from there. I was bigger than her, so she was fighting me like how those lions fight buffalo, by jumping on the bigger prey's back and trying to bring them down. It seemed to be working until I decided to change strategy. I stood up on my hind legs and then fell on my back. My body crushed Nala against the rock, and since we were at an angle, we tumbled down the rocky path. I used my superior coordination and bigger mass to control our position and made her bear most of the damage from our fall. In the end, I slammed Nala on the ground and pinned her down. My jaw immediately went for her neck and I bit down, not too hard but enough to make the statement that I won. Her body tensed, claws popped out on instinct as she was in a position that spelt certain death. And then her body relaxed in defeat. You win, Leo. I released my jaw and then loomed over her. I huffed to show my annoyance. Sneak attack is so not cool, Nala. What? You are the one who said all is fair in fight and hunting, Nala replied while looking up at me with her big eyes, curious and eager to learn as all cubs should be. We are not fighting or hunting, we are not capable yet. What we do is just play, I said to her. We could have gotten hurt. What if I made a mistake and we fell over the edge? If you are going to sneak up on me again, better do it on an open field next time. She stayed silent for a while before accepting my reason. I'm sorry, and you're right. We both would have died if that was the case. I narrowed my eyes this time. You will die, but I will live with some broken bones, falling from such height? How? Easy, I will use you to cushion my fall, I answered with a smirk. Please get off me before I claw you in the face. Try, I said and put my paws on her face while leaning my head back as far as I could. Her paws tried to reach for my face, but her claws missed me by barely an inch. I was bigger than her and had longer limbs. She was completely powerless to do anything. In the end, she gave up with a sigh. Okay, you prove your point. Please get off me before the others think we are mating. Ew, I was quick to get off her. She repositioned herself and stretched her aching muscles from the fall. Well, that was effective, too effective that it's insulting, as it should be. Perhaps hormones would change me, but currently, I do not want to even imagine doing a lioness. That shit was just nasty as hell. Oh, I nearly forgot why I came to you in the first place, Nala said as her ears stood up in realization. Jua and Zuri wanted to invite you to something. I asked. Yeah, I don't know what it is either. They promised it would be full of adventure, so I already agreed to it, she said in that carefree tone that only children can have. But why do they invite me? I asked with a weirded out face. Jua and Zuri were two of the weaker cubs in the pride, and I had been bullying them, to be honest. Especially when it came to feeding. Nala just shrugged. They just said they needed your help. They said meat will be there in case you need more convincing, I hummed thoughtfully while staring at the horizon. Okay, I'm in. It was not like I had anything better to do anyway. It could be fun. Although I was not complaining about my monotonous life, some adventure would not hurt once in a while. Nala snorted at my statement. It was the kind of snort that sounded mocking. I narrowed my eyes. Is there anything funny? Yes. Why do you act so thoughtful? We all know you are at the moment meat was mentioned, she said. Are you calling me greedy? I asked. No. I'm calling you fat. I blinked and then I pounced at her. I'll show you fat. I was not fat, it's called bulking. There was a clear difference. One was the product of laziness and the other was part of the journey to a noble goal. She dodged me and then ran away. I chased after her. But let's just say with all my size, speed was not really my forte. I couldn't catch her no matter how much I tried. Guess you couldn't be good at everything. See? You're so slow because you are fat. I chased her again, not because I was offended or anything. I was simply training myself. Yes, it was just a part of my training to become the greatest Lion King. It is greatly unnerving that Simba is not with us. I thought for sure he would be included, I said while walking at the back of the group. There were 4 of us, Nala, Jua, Zuri and me. I was walking at the back, just behind Nala, while the 2 other cubs led the way. We were already further away from the Pride Rocks than we should be. Simba is too bossy, he is annoying to be around, Jua said while his eyes focused in front of him. He goes around talking about how he is going to be king non-stop and that we should listen to him because of it. And Simba is not really the subtle type. Whatever he does, it always reaches the ears of the king, so we don't want to include him. Zuri said while looking back with a half smile. Simba was like a spoiled child as things stands. He was also constantly monitored by Zazu the bird, so I could understand why he was not invited. But he would be the most excited among us if they did invite him. We walked for a few more minutes, and the distance was getting too far for my comfort. Are we nearly there? If not, I am going to go back now, I said. I was not foolish. I knew how badly Simba messed up whenever he decided to go on an adventure. I did not have plot armor like he did either, so I did not want to tempt fate by any means. In a few years after I was grown, I would explore this world as much as I wanted, but while I was a cub, I wanted to be careful. Almost there, come on. Jua said and then began running through the tall grass. We all followed him and started running too. It was not long before we reached our destination. A tree, I deadpanned while walking around said tree and scanning it for anything interesting. Of course, we don't bring you here just to show you a tree, Zuri said with a knowing smile. I failed to find anything of interest here, I said. Look up, she said, and then all of us turned our heads upwards. Among the thick leaves and the complex branches of the tree, there was a half-eaten impala. The body of the prey was covered in dirt and dry leaves which masked most of the scent coming off from the meat. It was also high up in the tree, so the air current was different, making it so that even though I was right under the meat, I could not sniff it out. Is that a? Nala asked, but Jua cut her off in excitement. Yes. It's food. Someone just left it there and we can take it, he said with excited leaps. But we can't climb the tree to take the food. Which is why we invite you, Leo, Zuri said. You just have to climb up the tree and push the body off the branch. And then we can all share the food. All of them, including Nala, brightened up at the idea. They all turned to me collectively with expectation in their eyes. On the other hand, I was still looking at the corpse neatly hanging on the branch. My mind worked faster than my thoughts. They were cubs, they didn't know better. But I knew. I was not really into studying animals in my past life, but even I knew what a half-eaten prey on a tree implied. Panic finally settled in my heart, regret came right behind. I looked around the grasslands with worried eyes, my ears moved towards every sound around us. We need to get out of here quickly, I said, much to the shock of everyone. What? But do you have any idea what you've done? I shouted at Jua. He flinched back in fear and alarm. No predators just abandon their food like that. That is the work of a leopard storing his food, I said, and then not a second later, my eyes caught movement behind Jua. The cub blurred from my vision as I focused on the moving grass behind him. It took me another second to realize that it was not just moving grass. Atop the blades of grass was a beast perfectly blending in with the surroundings. I got a closer look when he neared us, but even then, it was just a blur of muscles and teeth. Run! I screamed, and then the leopard finally released a savage growl. The sound sent shivers up our spine. The vibration unlocked instincts we never knew we had. It was an instinct to run for our lives. We ran as fast as we could, so it was almost despairing to realize how slow our fastest was compared to the leopard. Jua was the nearest to the spotted predator and was the first to be taken away. A blur of motion, stealthy and swift. The only thing we heard was the agonized sound of a crying cub and the snap of a bone. The scent of fresh blood caught my nose as I ran. That scent struck an odd sense of terror in my heart. I thought lions were born kings, I thought we did not know fear, but I guess we do. We ran more, as fast as our little legs could take us. I turned my head to look behind, and I kind of wished I never did. The leopard was much easier to spot as his fur and mouth were covered in Jua's crimson blood. He was running after us again. I thought it would take more time for it to chase us again. I thought it would lose interest after it killed Jua. But the glint of cruelty in its eyes made me confront the truth. It was not hunting us for food, it just wanted to kill every one of us, and wouldn't be satisfied until it did. The instinct to kill a lion cub and reduce the competition for food was the main driving force behind its pursuit. When I faced forward again, I noticed the distance between me and the two other cubs had increased. I cursed under my breath, realizing that I was the slowest among us and that I would be the next one to die. At that moment, I was taught a lesson I thought I already knew. It was not always about size and strength in nature. Had survival been based on size, a lot of animals that went extinct wouldn't be gone. My mind worked faster than my legs as I considered what to do. I could try and catch up to Zuri and then trip her so that she would become the next victim. And then what? The leopard would continue its pursuit and still kill me anyway. The Pride Rock was far enough that the leopard had all the time in the world to kill us. If I continued running, there was no way of surviving this. Strangely, that conclusion brought a sense of peace and calm back into my heart. I knew then what I had to do. No. I knew what I wanted to do. Nala. Zuri. I called them as loudly as I could. Don't stop running and call the adults as fast as you can. I will fight him. The instinct of survival was fight or flight. If I couldn't run away, then you better be certain that I would give one hell of a fight. Enoa. Are you insane, Leo? Nala screamed back. Just go. I said one last time, and then I slowed down. When I came to a stop, Nala and Zuri were already far away. Nala screamed at me, but she never stopped. Her instincts drove her away even though her heart might want to stay. We were of the same pride, we grew up as siblings, and she was probably the one I was closest to among the cubs. But nature was all about survival. In the face of survival, feelings were nothing. I turned around and then locked eyes with the leopard that was closer than ever before. He came at me like the perfect killing machine that he was. To my senses, he was danger materialized. Death itself seemed to run alongside him. But I stood my ground. Death was not a stranger to me, I've died once before. This was my second life. It was a second chance that I was lucky enough to get. To be completely honest, it was a gift, it was an extra. So the chance of losing it didn't terrify me as much as it did back then. I was supposed to be dead anyway, right? Time seemed to slow down as I hardened my resolve. It was not that I did not fear death, but I had a logical understanding of what was at stake. This extra life, I will fight for it. Even if I lost, it meant I was going to return to zero. There was no loss on my side. That put me in a situation where I was a being with nothing to lose but everything to win. The leopard reached me, his yellow teeth bared in full, and then he pounced at me like I was prey. I ignored the instinct to run away, to step back or to dodge. I charged at death. As if I had a chance against a fully grown leopard, as if I were on equal ground with this absolute beast. The leopard expected me to run, it expected me to back away, but what it never expected was for me to also charge at it. The leopard missed me as I ran under him. He crashed on the grass, his claws catching green and his teeth biting dirt. We both recovered fast. I turned around once more and locked eyes with him. This time, the leopard paused, recognizing something different about me. An easy prey suddenly turned into a fight, and the predator became cautious because of the sudden change. "What do we have here? Aren't you a brave little one?" The leopard spoke, its voice sounding male. So it was a he. When you show your back to a predator, they would immediately see you as prey and attack you. But when you face them head-on, it was in their instinct to be cautious. Because usually, it meant the prey had something it could harm you with. It meant there must be a reason for the bravery. Not me though, the only thing I had was ginormous balls. Also known as courage. The line between delusion and courage was thin, and at that moment I was at that thin line which separated both. "But I wonder, what makes you so brave?" he asked and then circled around me. I did the same, never showing him an opening behind me. I faced him head-on, and we circled around the grass for a while. He sized me up and down, his predator eyes searching for a threat in me. On the other hand, my mind buzzed with strategy. I was a human once, and although we were weak and fragile as shit compared to other animals, we dominated the whole planet. This show's intellect was superior to any other attribute. I hoped I inherited some of that from my past life. I was slower, smaller, weaker, and inferior in every physical attribute. But I could plan and strategize better. After a while, he stopped circling around me. His eyes narrowed on me like they did previously, and he bared his sharp teeth at me. After sizing me up, he confirmed that I was not a threat to him. "You almost fooled me," he said, and then released a growl that sounded so low and guttural it sent vibrations on the ground. I replied with a growl of my own. Well, I tried to roar, but it was a growl that came out. But at that moment, my threat did not shy away from his. Whatever I had to do, I'll survive and protect my gift of life. Screw everything else. The leopard lunged at me and crossed the distance between us in a heartbeat. He was a living missile of pure muscle and fang. I was under no illusion that I could dodge him or suppress him. Being bitten was an unavoidable fate, but if that was the case, I decided where I wanted to be bitten. I charged forward and lowered my head. I offered my scruff, which was the back of my neck. The leopard saw that perfect opening and clamped down his jaw immediately. It was a vital spot for any other animals, but for a lion cub, the scruff was meant to be bitten. It was loose skin with barely any pain receptors so that our mother could carry us. But even then, a sharp stinging pain shot through my spine. I felt canines sink into my skin and tug harshly to tear a chunk away. Although the leopard held me by the scruff, the loose skin allowed me just enough movement to fight back. I twisted my head and then bit the leopard by the neck. My teeth clamped down on thick fur and thicker hide, which made it almost impossible for me to penetrate. But I gave it my best shot. I flexed my hind legs and started pulling back as hard as I could. The leopard tried to use his claws, but since I was pulling back, he had to use his front limbs to hold himself. With that, I neutralized his two greatest weapons, his jaw and his claws. We continued pulling fiercely at each other, but then the leopard got fed up and increased his effort. He tightened his hold on my scruff and began thrashing me violently. I felt a sickening tear in my skin and the place where he bit started to feel wet. The leopard seemed to be motivated by the taste of my blood as he became more violent. He allowed me to drag him backwards, and his paws came up. His claws made a clear line on my skin as I tried my best to inflict the same damage. But my juvenile weapons were not a match for his defenses. Leopards might be predators, but they also evolved to fight against other leopards. Unfortunately, a lion cub was just a weaker leopard. I felt him release his bite for a moment to readjust as I dragged him backwards. I took that opening to the fullest and whipped my head upwards. I bit at his most sensitive part. His nose. My canines tore into his wet velvety nose, and he was alarmed immediately. His body instinctively tried to back away, a big mistake as I had already sunk my teeth into his soft tissue. He ripped his own nose from pulling away. The leopard released a howl of pure agony and then he thrashed around violently on the ground. It must have hurt like a bitch from the way he was reacting. "Pussy," I said while spitting out a small part of his bleeding nose. I turned around and started running back to the tree where we had found the stored meat. My main goal was to survive, but in case I didn't, I wanted to make sure I was the only one dead. The pain stopped the enemy only for a few seconds before he came right for me again. This time, he was really pissed off. He released guttural sounds like he was choking on his own anger. I did not even make it halfway to the tree before he caught up to me. I saw a big rock in the grass, and I jumped up on it, claiming the high ground. I turned around, but I was already greeted by rows of yellow teeth. The leopard lunged at me. I could see the deepest part of his throat as his open maw slowly enclosed my head. Time seemed to slow down just enough for me to realize I screwed up. And then a blur. My body was ragdolled from the rock and we crashed on solid ground. The leopard moved so quickly and violently that I had no time to think. The only thing that saved me was my instinct as I covered my vitals. I tucked my head and lay on my back, taking the natural position that all creatures take when faced with a stronger foe. The elder brother would often see this technique being pulled by their younger brother. The endless play fighting between the cubs bore fruit as I executed the next move almost naturally like it was part of my primal instinct. I pushed the leopard with my hind legs, throwing him over my head to roll away. He was lunging for my neck, so his own momentum threw him off to the front. I recovered fast and then ran towards the tree again. This time, a genuine strategy formed in my mind. The last move gave me an idea. What happened next was like a battle between prey and predator. The leopard, driven by instinct, always went for my vitals, so he was easy to predict. I could tell that he was not an experienced leopard. The better way was to bite my legs and slowly drag me down instead of aiming for my vitals immediately. He would pounce for my head and spine, and I would roll on the ground and throw him to the side using his own momentum. The chase went like that for a while as we slowly got closer and closer to the tree. I felt the leopard swing at my legs from behind as I ran. I've seen lions do this, too, while chasing after prey. The aim was to throw off my balance and trip me. But I was no damn deer. Cats were one of the most coordinated animals on the planet, and I had been training. So I easily caught myself halfway into the fall and continued running. Alas, the enemy wanted me dead as much as I wanted to live. A scream, a genuine scream of pain, left my throat as the leopard gnawed down on my tail. I felt my feet wobble from pure agony which only increased as the leopard planted his paws on the ground to pull me to a stop. I tried to wiggle my tail out of his jaw, but he bit me at the very base of my tail. I couldn't do anything, so I came to a stop, much to his glee. I felt claws latch onto my skin as he pulled me towards him. I bent my body and tried to hit him back but to no avail. He bit me at the base of my tail, so I couldn't turn enough to fight back. My mind was abuzz with thoughts as I was being slowly pulled down. I reminded myself that my only goal was to survive, screw everything else. Ah! I screamed as I put power on my hind legs once more. I used every bit of strength I had to run away from his sharp grasp. The enemy tightened his jaw and also pulled back to match my strength. And then what I expected happened. A crush of bone, a snap of tendons, and a tear of muscles. The tail is one of the most sensitive parts of a lion. It helped us balance our movement, make sharp turns, and distribute our weight. So when such an important part came off my body, it was the same as losing a limb. I bolted out and almost fell. The importance of my tail was made evident almost immediately as I couldn't run as fast or as stable without my tail. But it only took a few moments for me to adjust. Blood marked my trail as I ran. The leopard was still busy with my tail, so I had enough time to reach the treeway before he did. At first, I struggled to climb the tree. I fell more than twice, but I persisted and eventually reached the top. It was a tall tree, and by the time I reached the branches, the leopard had already reached the same tree. And I kid you not when I said the cat with spotted fur literally ran up the tree. But that didn't matter to me anymore as I leapt down at the leopard. The giant cat was in the middle of climbing, so he had no way to dodge or block. His 4 limbs were busy hanging onto the trunk of the tree. My claws found his face. My right paw missed its mark, but my left paw managed to gouge out his eyeball. Blood immediately came out of the eye hole along with an eyeball. The leopard howled in pain and we both fell from the tree. If I couldn't damage him because of his thick hide, I would just let gravity do the job of breaking his bones. I recalled the talk I had with Nala back in Pride Rock. I wouldn't die even if we fell from a height because I would use her as a cushion. Being the one currently undisturbed by a fresh wound, I was able to maneuver during the fall and landed on top of the leopard. A deep thud resounded as the leopard hit the ground. I heard the sound of broken ribs and cracked bones, much to my utter delight. The leopard lay on his back and thrashed around rapidly from the pain. I jumped off his body and then lunged at him to attack. I aimed for his vitals. He instinctively covered his neck and soft belly, but that was fine. They were not the vitals I was aiming for. Instead, my jaw went towards his lower end. My eyes locked on his balls. I couldn't give a shit about what those balls entailed. The only thing I knew was that it would hurt as shit and that it was one of the few body parts that I could tear with my canines. So I gobbled those balls and chewed them between my teeth. They were even softer than expected as I bit right through them. This time, the sound released was the most pained. The leopard quickly got up and then tore off his own balls in my jaw as he ran away. His testicles hung and dragged behind him as he fled. I barely stood upright as I watched him run away. I felt something build up inside my chest as I watched the defeated enemy. Surprisingly, it was not joy, it was not relief, and neither was it anger. It was pride. I felt pride like I had never felt before. It was raw, it was undeniable, it was mine. The feeling overwhelmed every pain, every ache and fatigue. I planted my paws on the ground and released a sound from the deepest pits of my stomach. Roar. My first, proper roar. I couldn't even release another one as adrenaline began slowing down. But I imagined my roar echoing in the air. But I couldn't rest just yet. I saw at the very end of my vision, the leopard stopping and turning around. He didn't return, he dared not return. But he was there, waiting. Waiting for what? I asked myself before I noticed a pool of blood under my paws. The blood was mine. I didn't even realize it, but I had suffered many injuries during the short battle. I didn't even feel it when the leopard was chasing me, but my body was cut open so much that I was completely drenched in red. Every time the leopard pounced at me, I thought I threw him off me, but it was not that simple. His claws had been cutting open my skin, his teeth always leaving a mark. In every interaction, I always left with a wound. I looked like I could collapse at any moment. And I felt much worse than I looked. The leopard did not want to fight, but he was waiting to see me fall. Perhaps he wanted to finish me to get revenge for the nasty injuries I left him with. Maybe he just wanted to see me suffer like he was. Coward, I mumbled and started moving towards the leopard again. I was acting like I still had a fight left in me. When you are weak, fake strength. The leopard, being scared enough, also moved back the same distance I moved forward. I stopped when I felt like my legs would break at the next step and stood my ground. I did not collapse for a minute that felt like an eternity. And then my savior came in the air. It was faint and far away, but I could hear a roar in the distance. The leopard heard it too. He would not be able to escape with his injuries if he waited longer, so he started retreating once more. I remember your scent. I shouted at his back with all my remaining energy. If you survive that, I'll see you in a year. It was a promise. By that point, I would be big and strong enough to overpower him the same way he did to me. And then I would finish this battle. He disappeared from my vision and I finally lay on the ground and waited for my parents to come. I couldn't pass out though, lest they would abandon me, thinking I was dead with all my injuries. Leo. The concerned call from my mother brought me out of my stupor. I was but a living statue, barely conscious. My body was locked in its upright position, like my body knew I would never fall, so it just used that position to rest. My mother, not knowing the state I was in, came like a storm. Luckily, I had recovered some energy during the wait, so I did not fall when she softly knocked against me. The action was akin to a mother hugging her child. Are you alive? Can you breathe, Leo? She was both hurried and gentle in her behavior. She pranced around me and surveyed my entire body for injuries. The sight must not have been too pretty in her eyes, as she released soft growls mixed with whining sounds. "My poor baby, I'm so sorry," she said and licked me on my head to clean the blood. Her rough tongue against my fresh wound should have been painful, but it brought me a strange sense of ease. It was comforting. "I won," I choked out. Even my voice sounded exhausted. "I'll survive." This time, my mother was not the only one who reacted. The other lions, who were also present but surveying the surroundings to track the leopard, also paused and looked towards me in a mix of disbelief. "You won a fight for survival," Sarabi said. "I'm proud of you." That felt good to hear. "I'm so proud of me too. Now let's get you home," she said and was about to pick me up by the scruff. She stopped. My scruff was nothing more than torn skin at the moment. The leopard was not as gentle as my mother when he bit me there. "I can walk," I said and then moved using all my effort. My body felt like it weighed a ton, and I moved like I was in a dream. My mother immediately came beside me so that I could lean on her. She matched my movement, and with her help, I was able to take small steps towards Pride Rock. There were 3 other lionesses beside my mother. They didn't come too close to me, knowing that they couldn't be of much help since my mother was already beside me. They would just rob the oxygen from my surrounding air. They were also cold-hearted predators, so they found it hard to be too sympathetic towards me. I had to remind myself that 1 out of 8 cubs reached adulthood, so losing a cub was all too common for them. After we walked for a few minutes, my nose caught the scent of new blood. I looked around for a bit, and then I saw the corpse of Jua in the clearing. His body lay on the ground, and behind him was a trail of blood which indicated that he had crawled away until he died from his wound. The leopard had inflicted a fatal wound, and he didn't survive. However, he didn't die immediately either. I could imagine the regret, the horror, and the helplessness he must have felt right before his death. I felt something familiar until I started fighting back. I stopped in my tracks and stared for a bit. That could have been me if I were not strong enough. That could have been me if I were not braver. That could have been me if I had wasted even one opportunity. Survival of the fittest. The saying had never been more true and meaningful to me. I swore once more in my heart to be the fittest in the world. I swore I was going to die of old age in this life. "Come on, his mother will deal with his corpse," Sarabi said with barely any emotion in her voice. Her heart was only big enough to care for her own cubs. The loss of a cub was bad for the pride, but that was it for her. We continued walking for some time before we eventually devised a new way for her to carry me. I climbed on her back, and the rest of the way was much easier. After we reached home, I finally allowed my consciousness to slip away while my mother nursed my wounds. 2 weeks later, my time during the recovery phase was quite enjoyable, to say the least, except for the early days. The first and second days after my fight, the world was literally burning down for me. My wounds started swelling up and bruising, making even the simplest act of breathing painful. I couldn't sleep, as every way I lay would irritate my wounds. I almost wished I had died right then and there, because the agony was that unbearable. But on the 3rd day, things got better, and then it improved as more days passed. My mother became my nurse while I recovered. She would lick my wounds to stop any infection, and she would share her body heat so that I didn't have to waste energy staying warm on my own. She even started feeding me her milk again due to my injuries. Not only that, the pride also shared with me more meat than I could eat while I recovered. During the 2 weeks, my life was filled with eating and sleeping, just like how it was when I was an infant. And today, most of my flesh wounds have healed. The only pain was in my bones, but that too was fading rather quickly. Leo, Leo, Leo. Tell that story again. Simba relentlessly nudged me to my side while I was trying to sleep peacefully on top of a rock. He was not alone in annoying me, as other cubs were right behind him. I had become some type of war hero among the cubs after my fight with the leopard. They would keep bothering me to tell the story of my fight. I've repeated the same story more than 5 times at this point. "Just let me sleep peacefully," I said and knocked Simba down from the rock. "Come on, just a little bit," Simba insisted while getting up. In the end, it was much easier to tell the story and tell them to piss off for the rest of the day instead of waiting for them to tire out. I sighed and sat upright. I looked at the 5 cubs on the ground beneath me. Simba, Zuri, Nala, and 2 other cubs whose names I could not recall easily. The pride had 7 cubs originally, but now it was only 5 that remained. Jua was killed by a leopard, and I think the other one was killed by a stampede when he went to see the adults hunt buffaloes. Okay, but this will be the last time I tell this story, I said, and the cubs shouted hooray before huddling up in front of me. And so I began my tale. I was reluctant to begin, but when it did, I quickly lost myself just like the other cubs. It was quite enjoyable since it was about how awesome I am. Everyone loves boasting in the end. I added some exaggeration here and there. The wind carried Jua's final screams to my ears. In that moment, it settled in me that the situation was truly life or death and my dear friend was killed just like that, I said, and then a sober mood came over us. Some ears dropped at the mention of the dead cub. The fear I had in my heart was replaced with anger. It was rage unlike anything I've ever felt before. I looked at Nala and Zuri, who ran in front of me, and I imagined the same fate for them. I couldn't forgive myself if I let them die just like Jua, so I decided to fight the leopard. I turned around and stared death in the eyes, and it blinked first, I said. The cubs oohed and awed while Zuri and Nala looked at me with round, shining eyes like I was their hero. Which I did, to be fair. Saving them was just not the main reason why I fought. I continued the story. The cubs paid attention like I was breathing fire. In the end, the leopard ran away. He might have been bigger and faster, but I was more courageous. We both gave each other permanent marks to remember the brutal battle. I took his eye, and he took. I said, turning around to show the stump at my rear. There was no tail, only a small stump. He took my tail, I said. Wow. So cool. I wish I was brave enough to fight leopards too. In their amazement, they were getting too close to but so I quickly turned around to stop them. That's it, now leave me alone. This time, the other cubs listened to my words. They left one by one to do their own things. Most of them would probably do something stupid, as is the nature of the cub. Thanks for the story, Leo, Simba said and jumped away on the rocks. He looked like he was playing "The Floor is Lava" with how he refused to touch the ground. Nala was the last to leave. She stared at me for a little bit, wanting to say thank you even though she had said it countless times already. Nala, hurry up. Simba called her and she finally turned away. Coming. I watched the 4 of them leave. Then my eyes went to Zuri, who was laying down on the ground slightly below me. You're not going again? I asked. Yes, I prefer staying right here with you, she said while getting more comfortable on the ground. I'll only be sleeping, so it will be pretty boring to hang around me, I said. I know that, and it's all right, I need some sleep as well. The newborns were so loud last night I could barely sleep, she said. That reminds me, there were newborns 2 days ago. One of the lionesses gave birth to 3 new babies. Which means that now the pride consists of Mufasa, 9 lionesses, 5 cubs, and 3 newborns. Do whatever you want to do, I said and lay down on the hard rock. It felt oddly good to press my aching bones lightly on the hard surface. With Zuri's gaze on my form, I went to sleep. I've healed, and now it's time to grow once more, 1 week later. The Elephant Graveyard. As I became a lion, the memories of my human life were slowly fading away. Perhaps it was due to not having the same brain, but I was slowly losing memories, especially those related to my personal life. I knew I would forget my knowledge of the Lion King movies at some point. Therefore, I made a list. It could be an event or a word, things that would warn me that some shit was about to go down. The term elephant graveyard was one of them. If I remembered correctly, that was one of Simba's first screw-ups in the movies. Scar tempted him and sent him straight to a bunch of hyenas, hoping they would kill the young king. In the end, Simba survives with plot armor as Mufasa comes and saves him in time. You want to go to the elephant graveyard? I asked once more at the smiling and optimistic Simba. He was still a ball of sunshine as of now. Yup, and not just that, I want you to come with me, he said and puffed out his chest. He seemed certain that I would follow him. Unfortunately for him, I ain't going anywhere near that place. Huh? Why not? It will be so cool. They said there are rotting bones and oozing mud, he said, trying to convince me but failing horribly. Who said this? I asked instead, even though I knew it was Scar who manipulated him. Ah, people, antelopes and birds, he stumbled on his own words. Sure, I deadpan. Anyways, they said every adult have been there. It's just us cubs who are not allowed, he said and came even closer to me. Please Leo, wouldn't you come with me? He asked with a tilt of his head. I met his eyes for a bit and nearly faltered. I sighed, Simba, the last time I broke the rules I was crippled and lost a tail. I don't want to take any chances again. If you want, you can invite the others. His ears dropped at my refusal but he nodded in understanding. All right, I understand. He turned around and walked towards the group of lionesses resting under the shade of trees. I assumed he was going to invite Nala like he did in the movies. Best of luck to them. I sighed, I hope it was that simple, I care too much about them. My existence itself could change fate, so I at least had to make sure Mufasa got there in time to save them, even if I did not intervene outright. But first, I got up and walked to the dark corner of the den. I picked up a femur bone from the remains of our last meal and left to go towards Scar's den. Scar lived in one of the caves of the Pride Rocks, so his den was not far. I struggled a bit while traversing the rocky terrain. Since I lost my tail, balancing has been a challenge. I really hoped I would adapt to my own body soon. Uncle Scar, I called when I reached the den. My voice echoed through the cave and I listened for movement with my ears. It was not difficult for me to pick up the sound of movement and I locked my eyes on one of the darker corners of the den. Among the shadows, he emerged, his eyes locked on mine with the usual dark amusement. He always looked at me with those eyes, as if my existence itself was a funny joke. I hope he did not see himself in me or something. We were nothing alike. Your senses are sharp. It seems you inherit everything from Mufasa except for his crown, which unfortunately goes to Simba, he said. His voice sounded like a river of coal tar, dark, thick and slow. His words had a way of sticking to your heart and mind. I scoffed, please don't try your word tricks on me, it wouldn't work. I couldn't care less if I was the crown prince or not, oh, but I'm not playing any tricks. I just think that you deserve to be the future king more than the brat, he said as he stood on a high ground. He looked down at me from his towering position. It might sound silly but somehow that annoyed me. Like really annoyed me. I was trying to start with small talk first, but that made me go straight to the point. You told Simba about the elephant graveyard, I said, and he blinked his eyes in surprise. He was not expecting the confrontational tone in my voice and his mind worked for a bit. Yes, the words might have slipped my tongue, he said. You are playing a coward's game, Scar. You think I don't know what you are trying to do here? I said, manipulating and pushing a naive cub towards danger is too low even for you, he stayed silent. It was not the usual silence that could be ignored, his silence was loud. He was angry, so very angry beneath his layer of stoicism. I could almost taste his desire to lash out and kill me at that moment. But Scar had learned to hold back his anger and hatred over the years, so he calmed down soon. That was not my intention, but I can see how my words could have such an effect on the adventurous spirit of Simba, he said and then jumped down from his high ground. He landed with a loud thud and then lunged at me. At that moment, I realized the stark difference between a lion and a leopard, why one was considered the king of the jungle and the other just a big cat. I could feel the immense weight of his seemingly fragile frame, the frightening power beneath his thick layer of hide. He was like a storm wrapped in fury, a force of nature rather than just a deadly beast. I stood my ground, my heart froze, but I did not flinch. Unlike the last time when I ran from the lunge of a leopard, there was something inside of me that remained solid under the heat of fear. A stubbornness that refused to run away. Sheer pride. Scar opened his jaw and before I could truly react, his mouth came down at me. He came close, but his fangs went past me and onto the ground below. In a blur of violence, he picked up the femur bone on the ground. His jaw snapped the thick bone as if it were a stick and one half fell in front of me. Thank you for bringing this, I was starving, he said, and then in a blur of motion, he turned around and walked away from me. I continued watching him in silence as he sat on the rock and started chewing on the bone to lap at its bone marrow. Eventually, I picked up my portion and turned around to leave. Leaving already? Scar asked as he saw that I was going to leave. Yes, I can't enjoy food in your den, it smells horrible, I said, causing him to chuckle. I can't even do my business outside my den, otherwise Mufasa will think I am challenging his authority inside his own territory, he said. Lion kings used their piss to mark their territories. They would spray their pee on trees around their kingdom to show their dominance. Usually, if a male lion is inside the territory of a more dominant one, they would try to do their business somewhere far away or on the ground and mask the scent as much as possible. Scar was doing the same thing. That sounds problematic, I said, to which he replied coldly, it's enough to drive anyone insane. Indeed, the reason why Scar wanted the throne was more than just a thirst for power or greed. It was also a way to escape his horrible and pathetic life. That's the problem with male lions. You are either king or you are nothing. I left the den and threw my food away when I was outside. Then I head straight towards the place where the rest of the pride were staying. My eyes searched for someone, and luckily, I was able to find him mingling with a few lionesses under the shade. Yeah, I was still a cub, so I couldn't do much. But I had Daddy Mufasa. I ran towards him and I told him about the situation. Father, it's about Simba, I said, and he turned his head immediately. What is it, Leo? He asked while standing. His presence was unlike Scar. There was no danger in the sense that his presence hides nothing. He was king, and he felt like king. He need not play tricks to get what he wants. Uncle Scar told Simba about the elephant graveyard, and now my brother is on his way there, I said. The part about Scar was super necessary. The other lionesses and Sarabi immediately perked up in concern. Simba? But why go there? He asked. To test his courage? For adventure? Why wouldn't he go there? Shira, one of the lioness, said. Mufasa took a thoughtful silence before he nodded. Don't worry, I will pick your brother myself. Thank you for informing me, Leo. And then off the king went to save Simba. I was done. I made sure the cannon stayed the same. Mufasa might even reach them before they were attacked by the hyenas. In the meantime, I played with the newborn cubs of the pride. They were still too young to even see properly, but they were absolutely adorable. A newborn lion was no different from a kitten. The walk of shame. Nala returned to the pride with a walk of shame. It was late in the afternoon, that exact moment where daylight fought with night. The result was an orange sky and a sun that was slowly turning blood red. The adults immediately started scolding her for what she did. Her mother in particular seemed equally concerned and pissed at her daughter's actions. After she got an earful, she made her way toward me. I was sitting on a dead log from a fallen tree. I was not too far away from the pride, but I was not too close either. Unbothered, but I could still see what's going on. Hi, Leo. Nala greeted me. Hello, Nala. I greeted her back with a grin. You don't look like you had a pleasant adventure. It was a disaster. I knew following Simba would get me in trouble sooner or later, she said. I thought you'd learn not to break the rules after what happened last time, I said. So tell me, what happened? She walked in front of me and sat down like an obedient house cat before she explained. Simba and I went to the elephant graveyard. It's somewhere beyond the northern borders. It was cool at first, but then the hyenas came and tried to kill us, she said with a sigh. Hyenas are scavengers, so it makes sense why they would be in an elephant graveyard. It must be heaven for them, I said thoughtfully. Yeah, we really should have thought it through before we went there. But luckily, the king arrived not long after and chased away the hyenas, she said, her ears perked up at the mention of Mufasa. The king is so awesome. She paused, and then her eyes became cloudy as she dreamed about the king. Mufasa really had so much aura, he was already pulling the young Nala. I chuckled seeing that. She shook her head. I heard that you were the one who asked the king to come save us. Thank you for that, Leo. I don't know what would have happened otherwise. Well, I'd probably be dead, she added afterward. The king was the one to save you, I barely did anything, so he should be the one to thank, I said. Anyways, where's Zuri? Nala asked, changing the topic quickly. I looked at her weirdly. How should I know that? Oh come on, she's always beside you even when you're a jerk, Nala said. So? Where is she? She followed the hunters today. Her mother said they're hunting zebras and she wanted to see it, I said. If it's not buffalo, 2 or 3 lionesses are enough to hunt down prey. Prey animals were abundant in the Pride Lands, so it was easy enough for the lionesses to take turns hunting for the pride. Zebras. I should have gone with her instead of Simba. Why didn't she invite me? Nala whined dramatically. Hunting a zebra was one of the most difficult things to do, as the herd could be massive and they all looked the same. Locking onto one zebra could be difficult when they ran in groups, which often led to failure. To young cubs like us, seeing the hunters take them down was a sight to behold, one that we imprinted into our minds forever. Nala and I hung around for a while. When the sun finally set on the horizon and the world settled into darkness, we heard a roar. It was the roar of a successful hunt. They got it. Nala screamed when she heard the roar of the hunters and immediately ran toward the sound. "Come on, Leo. I want to see it," she said while turning her head. "I'm coming," I said, but I was not in a hurry like her. She quickly disappeared from my sight while I followed behind at a good pace. In the meantime, I was enjoying my night vision. It felt super weird yet natural at the same time for me. I saw the other members of the pride going toward the hunters as well. It was often difficult to bring home prey when it was killed far away, so calling the rest of the pride for a meal was often easier. Mufasa and Simba also came down from Pride Rock. The two looked like a proper father-son duo as they laughed with each other. Mufasa carried Simba on his thick mane, and they went toward the kill together. I wouldn't say I was not jealous because, truthfully, I was jealous of their relationship. My past life was the only reason why my jealousy wasn't an issue. It was not fair how Simba was treated better even though we were twins. But that was just how things were. If Mufasa cared for every offspring, that would include all the cubs. Even Nala and Zuri were his daughters. So the king simply chose one cub to call his son and loved him like so. I was born later than Simba, so I was not the lucky one. But looking at it from another perspective, I was lucky I didn't share a deep bond with a king who was dying soon. The world was unfair, but it was fair because it's unfair to everyone. I was the last to reach the meal. The other adults were already feasting on the zebra when I got there. Meanwhile, the other cubs stayed right behind, waiting for their turn. "You finally got here, Leo." Zuri welcomed me with the closest thing a lion could give to a bright smile. "Hey, Leo." "Hi." The cubs greeted me warmly with respect when I got there. But I did not greet them back. I simply walked past them and went toward the meal. Immediately I got growls from the adults, but I didn't give a shit. What happened today was a warning. The cannon had started and I had a very rough future ahead. I was just a cub, there was very little I could do. Mufasa would die, Simba would run away, and Scar would take over the pride. Then the hyenas would become a part of us through Scar, and then there was also the upcoming drought. I needed to grow faster. I needed to eat more. I wouldn't accept living on scraps anymore. "Go away, cub," one of the older lionesses growled out. I was not dumb enough to take a bite near Mufasa or the stronger lionesses. I picked my position near the older lionesses who were at the bottom of the hierarchy. "Fat chance. Move, Granny," I said and went into the crowd of hungry lions. Immediately I was met with resistance. The adults tried to push me away with their bodies, but I was 2 times heavier than the other cubs, so I was not easily ragdolled. On the other hand, I was small enough to easily slip between them, and sure enough, I got access to the meat after pushing through the hungry beasts. With great fervor and newfound hunger at the smell of meat, I began tearing away at the zebra and started eating. The adults continued growling at me, and when I refused to back down, they bit. One of the lions opened her bloody jaw and tried to bite me at the side of my head. I retracted my ears and bore the assault. Of course no one truly wanted to hurt me, it was just a warning. A warning I refused to listen to. When she pulled away, I bit back at the loose skin of her lips. She whined and pulled away from the pain and did not bother me again. The feeding slowly became even more intense as the portion got smaller. The angry adults tore at the meat faster than ever before. I competed with them. I was smaller and weaker, but I was rubbing shoulders with them through sheer guts. I was often pushed aside rather easily, but I never backed away. After getting up 10 or 20 times, the adults gave up, and I won my right to feast with them. Perhaps it was the illusion of victory, but it was one of the best meals I'd had yet. There was something raw and primal about feeding like this. I was wrong in my previous assessment, It was not just about eating or displaying the hierarchy. It was just brutal. Strangely enough, it was bonding too. "You little rascal," one of the lionesses screamed at me. She tore a huge chunk of meat off the bone with great difficulty, but I stole it straight from her jaw. Some of the meat was a little too tough for my young teeth, so I had to get creative. She bit me at my scruff and pinned me on the ground. I struggled fiercely, but she overpowered me. But in the end, she couldn't waste time with me and continued eating. I got up and shrugged off the pain before I continued eating as well. I was growing up to be the baddest beast ever. The grass was still heavy with dew. The air was cool and chilly under the blush of sunrise. I did not know staying still could be so exhausting until now. My limbs were starting to cramp, and my muscles coiled under my hide as I hid behind the bush, staying low enough for the grass to conceal me. My golden eyes stared unblinking at my prey. In the meantime, I was trying to mind control the damn animal to come my way. "Come this way, come this way, come this way. This is the shorter path. Come this way," I chanted in my mind. A few dozen meters away was a rabbit just outside its burrow. The rabbit was standing upright. Its ears stood tall and changed directions rapidly to listen for movement around it. Its stubby nose twitched as it took in the scent around it. I was staying downwind, so I was sure it couldn't smell me. Its eyes, though, were something I paid no mind to. Even when the rabbit looked my way, I knew I was too far to be seen. The greatest senses of the rabbit were its senses of hearing and smell. Its big fluffy ears had a purpose other than looking adorable. I discovered that much after countless attempts at catching them. I had lost count of how many times I tried to catch one of them, but I always failed. But after countless failures, I finally developed a proper strategy to catch them. Trying to sneak up on them was useless. Their sense of hearing was too good to not hear you coming from miles away. And it was just a matter of wind direction before your scent reached them. So, I concluded that the best strategy was to ambush them. They couldn't hear me coming if I stayed still. But ambushing a rabbit was easier said than done. Which was why I'd spent countless mornings studying their behavior before deciding where and when to ambush my prey. Rabbits were most active during dawn and dusk. They would check their surroundings multiple times before they even came out of their burrow. And even if they did, they would run back into their burrow the moment they felt threatened. Only after hours of seeing no predator and feeling comfortable would the rabbit even move away from the safety of its burrow. I'd been stalking the rabbit for 2 hours now. I began when it was completely dark, and now it was sunrise. But I knew all my effort and patience would pay off today. The rabbits needed water. They could quench their thirst from the dew on grass, but the last time this particular rabbit visited the watering hole was 2 days ago. So it needed to visit the watering hole today. I had discovered the prominent path the rabbit took to go to the watering hole through its scent and other days of observation. The bush I decided to hide in was right along the path the rabbit would often take to go to the watering hole. So I lay here, waiting ever so patiently. The rabbit was extremely timid and fearful, but necessity pushed it. It needed more water, or it would be dehydrated. It crept forward slowly along my predicted path. It would stop suddenly, standing upright to search for any danger. Its body turned, ready to run back to its burrow. When it found nothing suspicious, it would continue on its way. "Come on, come on. A little closer, a little bit closer," I thought in my mind while I unwound my muscle fibers, ready to pounce. "Come to Papa." When the rabbit was within my range, I pounced from my hiding spot. The rabbit had no time to react as I sank my teeth into the back of its head. It struggled fiercely, fighting for its life. Its little legs pushed against my chest to try to get free, but my jaw clamped down with no intention of letting go. I was biting into its muscles, not just its skin, so I was confident in my hold. The rabbit was small compared to me, but it was still decently big. I wrestled for a bit, applying and learning techniques at the same time as I tried to pin it down. In the end, I learned new ways to use my claws to pin my prey. My claws dug into the brown fur of the rabbit and held it down. In that moment, I released my hold and then quickly bit at the neck of the rabbit for a fatal attack. When I bit at the neck, the rabbit struggled even harder. To my surprise, the rabbit continued moving even after a minute had passed. That was when I learned something new. When the adult lions bite at the neck of their prey, the aim was not to break their neck or rupture an artery to let them bleed out. The aim was to suffocate the prey by biting down on their windpipe. Immediately, I adjusted my bite, and it worked. The rabbit released strangled noises from its nose, and after less than 30 seconds, the rabbit passed out. "My first successful hunt," I said with pride after I killed the rabbit. I had hunted insects, lizards, and frogs, which all tasted horrible, by the way, but this was my first time killing prey that had real meat. After that, I tore open the skin of my prey. The meat and organs that greeted me were like a juicy, appetizing gift. I dug into the rabbit, I tore open its guts, and lapped at the thick red blood of its insides. It was delicious, even more so since I caught it with great effort. After I ate most of the rabbit, the sun was high in the sky. It was already late in the morning. The heat of the sun was getting annoying, so I decided to go home and eat in the comfort of the den. "Leo, what do you have there?" Sarabi asked when I reached the den. She and a few other lionesses were basking in the morning sun outside the den. I dropped my food to reply. "A rabbit." "A rabbit? Where did you find a rabbit?" My mother asked with a curious tilt of her head. "Don't mock me, mother." "It's my prey," I said. "You successfully hunted a rabbit?" One of the other lionesses asked with a dumbfounded face. "Yes." "That's impossible," they said collectively. This time, I was the one dumbfounded. "Why?" "Unless it's on the rare occasion that the rabbit is injured or wandered too far from its burrow, it's almost impossible to catch a rabbit," my mother replied. "They are too cautious, and they have good hearing, so it's impossible to sneak up on them. And in a chase, they are too nimble and far too small for lions to catch," one of the lionesses added. I deadpanned. I knew that, which was why I ambushed it. "I guess I got lucky," I said without explaining myself. "I guess you did. Enjoy your meal, Leo." "It won't be often you get to taste a rabbit," my mother said, and I picked up my food and went inside the den. The world was not exactly Disney, but the animals were also smarter than they were in my past life. But they were not smart enough to devise strategy as easily as I did. Most of their strategies were passed down from generation to generation and refined throughout the years. It was one of the greatest advantages I had over the other animals. They were smart but were still deeply connected to their primal sides. I was the exception. I could think and strategize better than anyone. After all, in my past life, I was the apex of creation. A creature that hunted animals 100 times their size and casually drove beasts to extinction. And I inherited that essence. I was a creature with the essence of humanity and the body of the king of beasts. When thinking of it like that, I couldn't help but grow even prouder. I felt like I was destined for greatness. "I can't wait," I said and split open the skull of the rabbit to eat its soft brain and bitter eyeballs. 7 months old, on this fine morning where the cool atmosphere and the heat of the sun create the perfect weather, I made my way toward Scar's den with a rabbit. After my first successful hunt, I only got better at catching rabbits. Just this morning, I caught not just one but 2 rabbits. One of them I already ate while the other was hanging from my jaw. I saw Scar lying on top of a massive mound of rock when I entered the cave. He was nursing his own wounds before he turned to me with curious eyes. I dropped the rabbit on the ground to speak. "Good morning, Uncle Scar." Scar remained quiet, his eyes fixed on me with vivid intensity. I guess I couldn't blame him since he was not in good shape, and I was partly to blame for it. Long story short, Mufasa went to Scar after what happened with Simba in the elephant graveyard. The king was not so dumb that he couldn't connect the dots after I specifically told him that Scar was the one to tell Simba about the elephant graveyard. The king was not happy at all with the conclusion he came to. So he roughed up the weaker lion and put him in his place. Scar was injured and had not left his den for a few days now. "What are you doing here, Leo?" he asked me with a measured tone. "Did you come here to show off your kill?" From how he was reacting to my presence, I think he did not blame me for what happened. Instead, all his hatred and ire was focused on Mufasa himself, not an unassuming cub. That was good for me. That was great for me. "I heard what happened," I said, and silence followed. He stared at me, studying my expression for a long time. Perhaps he was expecting me to mock him or pity him. I did neither. "Here, I brought this for you," I said and pushed the dead rabbit with my paws. This time, his eyes became wider with surprise. Lions were very selfish and greedy when it came to food, even amongst their own pride. So giving an outsider food was unheard of. It might not seem much from my humane perspective, but to a lion, this was the rawest way one could show affection and goodwill. The only time other lions did something similar was when a mother gave food to her cubs. "You're giving that to me?" he asked, dumbfounded. "Yeah, I figured you'd need it more than I do," I said. But my answer did not satisfy him. He shook his head and asked again. "Are you sure? But you're selfish and greedy when it comes to food." That made me thoughtful for a few seconds before I lowered my head to bite at the leg of the rabbit. I pushed the rabbit with my paws while pulling it with my jaw. The right leg of the rabbit tore off with a snap. I chewed the meat for a while. The sound echoed through the silent cave like I was doing an ASMR. Scar simply watched me with an expression that said, "Really?" I swallowed with a satisfied gulp. "Okay, you can have the rest. There's still a lot more meat to go there," Scar said, unimpressed. "Just take it before I change my mind again," I said and turned around to leave. "I'll try to bring more if I can. Get well soon, Uncle Scar." I did not wait for a response and left the den immediately. I've seen and done what I needed, so there was no need to stay. I did not like being in his vicinity much. It was like being in the presence of a criminal who might stab you if you looked him wrong. My relationship with him was built on sheer caution. After leaving Pride Rock, I head back toward the plains where Simba was waiting for me. I had been spending a lot of time with my brother recently. Now you might be asking why I did what I did. Why did I give my hard-earned food to Scar? Did I truly feel bad about being the reason for his injury? Have I come to care for the evil lion after interacting with him multiple times? The answer was, hell no. Who do you think I am, Jesus? Lion Jesus? Wait, that's Aslan. The true reason why I was doing this was to make sure I stayed on his good side. Because, believe it or not, that evil cat was about to become the king of Pride Lands. Whether I like it or not, it will happen. I could not stay beside Simba 24/7, and I could not give advice or warnings to the king without it being disregarded. So if the canon really happened and Scar became king, I needed him to like me enough that he would let me live. Or in the best case scenario, let me continue living amongst the pride. Besides, it was always a good idea to stay on the good side of a possible king. Here I was, on another fine morning, trying my best to abuse the rabbit hunting glitch that I discovered not too long ago. But I was not too hopeful today because of the person I brought with me. "Wait for it, wait for it," I said, but Simba kept moving. It was like a moment of pause would literally kill him. Patience, patience, and no. Dash, but he jumped anyway. The timing was off by a mile. It was still too early to jump out from the bush. The prey had more than enough time and distance to escape. The rabbit ran and Simba chased after it. They moved quickly through the plains, but ultimately, the rabbit dived into its burrow, and Simba got his head stuck in a hole in his lame attempt to follow it underground. "Truly, you have the patience of a dying animal," I said while walking up to him. He pulled out his head after a few struggles and tried to dig the hole, but to no avail. "Give up, most burrows go too deep to simply dig out," I said, and Simba finally stopped with a fed-up huff. "This is so annoying." "I don't know how you are so good at this, Leo," Simba said. "It's not that difficult when you have patience," I said with a shrug. I was not actually too sad that we lost the prey. The pride had a meal yesterday, so I was still full. "You're weird, you know that, right? Our mother and every adult in the pride said you would be horrible at hunting, yet here you are. You are the first among the cubs to catch their own prey," Simba said honestly. Sometimes I wish I could be a little more like you," he admitted with a sigh. He didn't look at me when he said that. Just stared down at the dug-up dirt like it had all the answers. I digested his words carefully. Those were big words coming from Simba, and I knew it. Well, no need to sulk over it. It's not like kings need to hunt anyway. Your job will be to protect the pride and the kingdom, I said. "I guess," he answered. "The relationship between us could be better." We were brothers only in blood. The sheer favoritism shown to him made sure that we could never be truly equal, like brothers were supposed to. But that didn't mean that I hated him. It was quite the opposite, actually. I like Simba and consider him to be someone close, even though he could be childish at times. Which was the reason why I wished I could stop what was about to happen. But I had neither the power nor the competence to change fate. What I did back then was make sure fate takes its course, but changing it was a different matter. Even if I made sure Simba never followed Scar alone and let the stampede happen, I knew Scar would just find another way. Worst case scenario, he might lead his hyenas to fight the lions out of desperation. I knew the lions would win, but I was sure I would be one of the unfortunate souls to die. I was still too weak. All I could do now is expect the worst and hope for the best. Come, let's go to the watering hole, I said and turned. What are we going to do in the watering hole? He asked. I don't know, watch some crocodiles eat other animals? I said. Just leave the rabbit, they're not coming out anytime soon. Simba trotted up beside me, grumbling, but his eyes lit up at the thought of crocodiles. He was easy to distract. Easy to love. I had a feeling that these few days would be the last and happiest moments of my childhood. I knew of the disaster that was coming upon us. What I didn't know was just how right I was. It happened even more suddenly than expected. I was staying with the other lions, basking in the warm golden light of the sun. It was a lazy day for the pride, and most of us were sleeping and cuddling with each other. It was one of those moments where the whole pride came together to bond. But our peace was disturbed by a hornbill flying overhead. A familiar bird, often seen with the king. Zazu. It was not his presence but the news he brought that struck horror in everyone's heart. And what cruel news that was. Everyone to the gorge. Sarabi declared with a roar, and almost every lion followed her as they ran towards the gorge. 2 lionesses stayed behind as the newborn cubs needed nursing. Other than that, even the cubs followed the adults, including me. The adults ran fast, faster than any of us could catch up. We followed behind them with our little hearts thumping in our chests. For the young minds, everything after that moment felt surreal. I cursed under my breath and prepared myself for what was to come. I may be running behind the adults, but I already knew what awaited us at our destination. I did not feel tired when I reached the gorge. Exhaustion seemed to be so insignificant compared to what lay before us. The lions stood still and gathered around a body. We slipped under the adults' legs, and we froze when we finally saw what it was. It was more brutal than anything my mind could prepare me for. The scene before me made the animated cartoon look like heaven in comparison. Mufasa's body lay twisted at the base of the gorge, scarcely resembling the proud lion he once was. His golden fur was matted with dust, blood, and fragments of torn skin. One of his massive forelimbs was bent at an unnatural angle, shattered by the blunt force of hooves. The ribcage on his left side had collapsed inward, punctured by broken ribs, some jutting through torn muscle and skin. His face was swollen and marred until he was barely recognizable. One eye was crushed shut, the socket caved in from a direct blow. The distinctive royal mane was now tangled and smeared with dark, coagulated blood. The difference between the Mufasa I remembered and the one before me was so staggering that I was left speechless. There was no dignity in his posture, no pride in his eyes. There was only the heavy silence of death and the shadow of what used to be mighty. To us, it was like watching God fall from grace. "The king is dead," one of the lionesses said with a heavy voice, "and the prince likely suffered the same fate." You never knew words had weight until they pressed down on your heart and completely immobilized you. "No. Not Simba," my mother choked out. "We haven't found his body yet." Sarabi bolted out. She ignored the calls of the pride and searched madly for her son. There was desperation in her action. In that moment, she personified the hope of the pride. A hope that we watched slowly get swallowed by despair. The pride fell apart almost immediately after that. It was like a game of chess. You could have every single piece, but if you lose the king, the game is lost regardless. One could almost physically feel the gaping hole he left in the pride. We returned to the den rather quickly. Everyone abandoned Mufasa's corpse so easily that it was almost unnerving to my remaining human sense. The king was left where he fell. There was no burial, no ritual or funeral. He was left to be torn away by random scavengers. Once upon a time, he was an idol, a father, and a king to me. But there was nothing I could do except follow along with the pride. Funny enough, that made me want to become a lion king even more. Perhaps then I could change these brutal traditions to something better. We mourned for the day. Everyone dealt with the loss in their own way. My mother lay on the ground as if she were dead. Nala and the other cubs clung to their parents and remained almost inactive. But most of the lionesses, including me, were restless. We knew what was coming next, and we were preparing ourselves for it. And just like we expected, it came in the afternoon. Scar announced his presence with a roar. Roar. The thunderous roar was starkly different from what I remembered. Scar's roar was not regal or commanding like Mufasa's roar. Instead, it sounded raw, it sounded jagged, it sounded wrong. It started with a rasp as if his voice had been gathering dust for years, and then it rose to a shrill, like broken glass. Where Mufasa declared his authority, Scar sounded like he was begging for his authority. There was a bitterness and a desperate need to be acknowledged. I ran out of the den with a growl and watched him walk towards the Pride Rocks from a distance. He was not alone either. There was a clan of bloodthirsty hyenas behind him. I counted 71 of them as they came upon us. Roar. Stay close to me, Leo. Sarabi said as she walked past me. The other members of the Pride followed behind her. They went down the Pride Rocks to meet Scar and his hyenas on equal ground. You could feel the tension in the air, the foreboding in the wind. A lion pride adjusting to a new dominant male was always messy. The shift of rulers demands blood. We all went down and stopped in front of the Pride Rocks. Scar and the hyenas reached us and he stepped forward to announce himself king. He did not say it outright, but you could see it from his behavior. His chest was puffed, and he held his head high. The roar that occasionally escaped his throat was thunder that bestowed a new decree. Mufasa is dead, and so is Simba. There is no one else to lead this pride except me, Scar said and paced back and forth with hungry steps. Are you going to submit or will you resist? Scar said and intensified his gaze on my mother. You are the queen, Sarabi, so decide. That was a threat. The hyenas behind released guttural sounds from their backlands. From their behavior and upright tails, it was easy to tell that they were ready to fight on command. A clan of hyenas led by a lion was too much for a pride without a king. There was really no choice but to submit to the new rule. Scar had taken into account resistance, so he struck an alliance with the hyenas. With the alliance, he could dominate the pride and also fight off other challengers while being weak and cowardly. You can have his crown, but not his legacy, Sarabi said and bared her teeth at Scar. The other lionesses got low to the ground, ready to pounce. So you choose to defy me, Scar said, his voice low and vibrating. Then so be it. Then a fight broke out. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that by Mufasa's legacy, they meant the cubs. Shit, they meant me. The first thing a dominant male does after taking over the pride is kill the cubs of the previous ruler. This was done to assert dominance and also ensure that the females go into heat as soon as possible. It was an all-out war. And my life was on the line once more. The lions gathered together to form a circle. In the middle were 8 cubs, the last legacy and bloodline of the Lion King Mufasa. The lionesses bared their teeth and swiped their paws at the hyenas that came too close. Meanwhile, the hyenas that outnumbered them 8-1 slowly surrounded them from all sides. But still, the hyenas were hesitant to make a move. Surely, they could easily defeat the lionesses if they worked together, but no one wanted to be the first to approach. No one wanted to be the sacrifice for victory. That put them in a stalemate. But things were not looking good for us. Scar was finally done waiting and made the first move. He broke the silence and tension with a roar and charged towards the mothers protecting their cubs. Sarabi and Shira quickly pounced forward to meet him, and a savage fight broke out. That was a signal for the hyenas to attack as well. And thus all hell broke loose. The fight this time was completely out of my league. It was not like my fight with the leopard. It was not just a fight between two parties. This one felt more like a war. And I learned that war was messy. There was chaos and fighting everywhere. I turned my head in all directions and barely saw any coordination between the animals. They were all driven by instinct at that moment and fought like the wild animals they were. A roar here, a shrill growl there, followed by the eerie laughter and screams of hyenas. The scene was something straight out of a nightmare. The dirt under our feet turned into dust, and smoke rose. A few seconds into the battle, and I could smell the scent of blood. The others smelled it too, and that only intensified the situation. The pain scream of my mother easily caught my attention, and when I turned to look, I saw Scar sinking his teeth into my mother's shoulder. He thrashed her around violently before he released his hold to lunge at She-Ra. In a straight confrontation, a lioness stood no chance against a lion. Scar knocked the lioness down on the ground and tore her up. His claws grated against her skin while his teeth searched for her neck. The situation didn't last long, though, as Scar was not aiming to kill her. If he killed the lionesses, he would have nothing to rule over. He jumped off her and then ran straight towards us. Luckily for me, it was not the first time Scar pounced at me, so I reacted immediately. I ran towards him, ready to do whatever I could to hurt him, but then Scar suddenly changed his direction. He was not aiming for me. He was aiming for... No! The despairing scream of a mother synced with the nasty crunch of skull. My eyes widened, and I felt shock hit my body. I turned around and saw Scar holding one lion cub by the head with his jaw. The cub's head was already crushed, and blood fell from the maw that bit him. I did not recall the name of that cub, but I knew he was from my generation. He was a male lion cub who liked chasing insects in his free time. He did not like violence much, which was the main reason why he was lower in the hierarchy among us cubs. Instantly, the lionesses disregarded their formation and charged at Scar in anger. In just a few seconds, 4 lionesses were swarming him. Their teeth wanted nothing more than to tear him apart. But anger was only the downfall in a battle like this. The formation was lost, and the hyenas took that opening to attack the lionesses from behind. Their eerie laughter grew louder. This time, it sounded straight up demonic. They were in absolute glee because they were finally getting revenge on the lions that chased them out of the Pride Lands and bullied them for ages. I took one step back and then cursed out loud. Shit, I am so helpless. I knew I would be helpless in this situation since I was only a cub, but it was almost impossible to bear the feeling when it finally happened. I could vomit at my own weak and pathetic self. The hyenas started swarming. They were becoming too much for the lionesses to fight off. If they were not careful, they could lose their lives. And that right there was the game changer. Because you know what? The mothers loved their cubs, but not more than their own lives. The war that was happening was not a war they wanted to give their lives for. So, they ran. For all the masks of determination they put up in the beginning, they crumbled like a castle built upon the sand when faced with real consequences. The older lionesses and a few others who did not bear cubs started running away from the battlefield. A lion cub could always be replaced, but not their lives. That was nature. The only law in nature was survival. A dozen or so hyenas chased after the lionesses to continue harassing them. They snickered and laughed among themselves as they enjoyed bullying the greater beasts. They're just cubs. Scar roared. Are you sure you want to risk your life for them? That further demotivated the lionesses. The fight was quickly losing its intensity as the lionesses left one by one. And each lion was followed by many other hyenas, so the number of animals was plummeting rapidly. In the end, it was just 3 lionesses protecting us against Scar and a dozen hyenas. The chaotic part was over, so I could keep up with the fight a little better with this one. The remaining lionesses were Sarabi, Serafina, and She-Ra. Not today, Scar. I've already lost one son. I am not losing another, Sarabi said and bared her teeth in full. She was limping, but she persisted even so. The other 2 were right behind her and shared the same sentiment. Kill the infant and all the male cubs. Scar gave the order after the 3 lionesses wouldn't let him pass. The hyenas stopped circling around the lionesses and turned their eyes on us. They growled like dogs and came charging at us almost immediately. They were unlike lions or any other feline. The hyenas moved slowly, but they brought a certain feeling of aggression and dread as they came towards us. A criminal gang was the closest thing I could compare them to. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that their head shape and round ears made them look like some type of monster rats. Their ugly appearance, coupled with their laughter mixed with their growls, truly unnerved me like any other creatures did before. Leo, what should we do? Nala came beside me, and so did Zuri. They no longer had another adult they could hide behind, so they came to their only protection. Me. But how could I help them when I couldn't even help myself? You heard him, they wouldn't kill you. Just run. I said and burst out to meet the two hyenas that came my way. I saw with the corner of my eye the newborn cubs dispersing and running away. They were followed closely by other hyenas, and so I knew their fate was sealed. "We have a brave one," one of the hyenas said with a snicker. Look, he doesn't even have a tail. Poor lion cub." I ignored their mockery and charged at them with a small roar. Clearly, they were not ready for the fight I was bringing to them, so they stumbled on their steps. The first hyena snapped at me with its powerful jaws, but I ducked low and barreled into its chest. He staggered back a step. The hyenas were almost twice my size, so I didn't do any serious damage with that. But I took that moment to bite at its foreleg, teeth sinking into coarse fur and thick skin. It yelped and jumped away. "I guess that is Mufasa's blood right there," the other one laughed, circling. He darted in from my side. I twisted, narrowly avoiding his jaws. His teeth clamped shut, and the sound made me imagine the pain if he got me. Then another came in low and headbutted me hard in the ribs. I was knocked sideways, but I lashed out with my claws. I managed to leave cut marks on his snout. I scrambled to my feet, gasping as air was knocked out of my lungs. A low snarl and then a blur. I did not have enough time to react this time, as one of the hyenas got my front limb. The bite was different from anything I'd ever felt before. While lions had long canines made to tear at flesh and grip prey, hyenas had teeth that were meant to crush bones. The difference in their bite was clear, and I couldn't tell which was worse. I bit back at the shoulder. The hyena had a thick hide and fur. He was tougher than the leopard I fought. They were also extremely bulky. It felt like I was wrestling with a mini-tank. The hyena pulled me fiercely. My claws dug into the ground to remain stationary, but I was dragged anyway, leaving claw marks on the earth. It was not long before another one took a generous bite at me. This time, the pain came from my hind legs. While biting me at both ends, they started pulling me as if to tear me apart. I released a roar that sounded more like a scream of pain. I quickly used my experience in fighting and clawed at the eyes of one hyena. I missed, but that was enough to scare him as he let go. Then I twisted my body, and with the flexibility of a cat, I was able to latch onto the snout of the other one. The hyena released his bite and whined in agony. They moved away from me, giving me time to pick myself up. I released a low growl constantly as a warning not to get closer. A few seconds passed, and the two hyenas were ready to attack once more. This time, their expression promised something more vicious than last time. But the fight ended there. "That's enough," Scar said and slowly walked forward. He came between the two hyenas and towered over me. Behind him, I could see my mother and the other lionesses trying to fight off the hyenas. My mother tried her best to come to protect me, but she was stopped each time. It didn't matter what she wanted, just like how mine didn't matter. We didn't have the power to back up our desire. We were equally helpless before the scarred lion. I locked eyes with him. The fresh blood on his jaw told me that he had just killed another cub. It seemed this time, it was my turn. But he didn't attack me. His eyes tore away from mine, and he gave me a thorough look. Eventually, his eyes stopped at something behind me. It only took 1 second to realize he was looking at my back, which was without a tail. Something flashed in his eyes, something humiliating for me. It felt familiar. I just didn't want to acknowledge it before. It was always there. "So prideful and daring when you are still less than nothing," Scar said, and the words made my heart tremble. "Leave this one," he said coldly while walking past me. I was completely paralyzed on my spot. My mind analyzed the light I saw in his eyes, and the conclusion broke a piece of me. The dark amusement he always had towards me finally made sense. Was that pity? No, it was worse. He saw himself in me. A broken lion that could never reach the heights that other lions could. He killed the infant cubs to make sure the lionesses go into heat quickly. He killed the male lion so that they wouldn't threaten him in the future. But me? He thought of me as less of a threat. A lion that would be lucky if he even survived to adulthood. I was a crippled potential like him. And with the small goodwill I cultivated, it was enough for him to spare me while he slaughtered the rest. The expression I made must be the ugliest thing in the world. Raw rage boiled in my heart, and the small pride I'd built up with my achievements so far was completely crushed. But it also taught me an important lesson. Indeed, What was being the biggest among literal cubs? What was barely surviving a leopard's attack while losing a tail? Those were nothing. I realized then that I've been taking too much pride in what I could be, instead of seeing myself for what I was. A cub. A seed. Nothing more. Great, thank you, I said with hollow chuckles. I wonder if Scar could hear me. Gone was the small illusion I was living in. I was no main character. I was not destined for greatness. I was not going to grow into a lion king. If I was, I would be the crown prince, and animals would gather at my birth. I would be favored by Rafiki, I would not have to fight for my own survival, and I wouldn't lose a tail and become incomplete. I was none of that. I had to claw myself up there despite staggering odds. Whatever I want to become, I have to turn myself into that. A lion king. After that subtle shift of perspective, something changed in me. Pushing down the urge to fight and earn recognition now, I planted the rage and humiliation in my heart, so that one day they would grow into something much more than just feelings. My mind came back to the real world and I saw Scar walking up to the Pride Rock before he stood at the very peak. With a bloody jaw that took the lives of innocent cubs and ended a dynasty, he released a roar. An unworthy roar, but it bounced through the kingdom of the Pride Lands without a challenger. It was not a mighty roar, but it was the most memorable in my heart for everything it represented. It was the end of an era. Scar became king. My determination evolved. But the goal remained the same. And so, my story began. A lion that was not a born king but a forged king. For the next 3 days, there was no peace among the pride. We didn't fight, but there was a palpable tension in the air. Scar had taken the crown, and he was the king, but the rest of the pride was not ready to kneel. We obeyed his commands, but no one followed him like loyal subjects yet. You could say we were in the process of shifting and adjusting to the situation. But as time passed, the resentment slowly faded away, and it wouldn't be long until we knelt to Scar. Not because we wanted to, but because we had no chance. Scar was surprisingly understanding in this regard. After he killed most of the cubs, he remained isolated. He did not try to assert dominance or force obedience. He was waiting for us to eventually bow on our own. Well, he did try to rape some lionesses frequently, but he backed off easily enough when fought back, so that's innocence for a lion king, I guess. One of the reasons why he was so sure we would bow to him eventually was that he controlled the food. For the past 3 days, the pride had not eaten anything. Meanwhile, Scar and the hyenas hunted and feasted to their heart's content. The clan of hyenas surrounded Pride Rock, which made it almost impossible to leave, so none of us could go out to hunt. The adults would be fine for a few more days as lions could easily go a week without eating. But it was the remaining cubs that could not do such a thing. Nala, Zuri, and I. The 2 female cubs were spared just like me because they were old enough to not disrupt their mother's mating cycle, and they would grow up to be important members of the pride. We were growing cubs, which meant we could not eat huge meals in one sitting like the adults, and we burned more energy as we grew every day. We were hungry. I was starving. I stood just outside the den and gazed at the peak of Pride Rock. I saw Scar sitting there, eating a wildebeest by himself. The smell of a fresh kill was so tempting that I almost floated towards the scent like a cartoon character. I watched him eat. I listened to him eat. Until eventually, he got fed up with chewing altogether and moved away from the meal. The past few days, he had been eating so much that he couldn't force anything down his throat anymore. He lay a few meters beside the meal and then looked towards the den. The meat was out in the open, but the hyenas did not approach or try to take it. It was free for us to take, but that came with some implications. Scar was not just offering us food, he was inviting us. It was an invitation to finally bow and come under him. Eating the food would be like accepting his invitation. It was the first offer he ever made since he took over. The other lionesses noticed this too, and they stood up. They came to the entrance of the cave and stood there, the same as I did. They became thoughtful while gazing at the food. It was a tempting offer, but at the same time, giving in now, after only a few days, was too desperate. They didn't want to be that easy to convince. Well, not me though. Leo, my mother called my name immediately, as if reading my thoughts. Don't, she spoke one word that said 100 things. But I ignored her warning and smiled a smile she would never understand. I'm sorry, Mom. They wouldn't understand. They were females and had a future with this pride or any pride they were in. I was male, a cub who would be kicked out of the pride the moment I stopped being a cub. I had no home until I earned it. Therefore, I had no time to show such petty resistance and sabotage myself at a phase when I needed food the most. What was my earliest observation again? That's right, a lion was either king or nothing. I walked out of the den and climbed up the pride rock. Scar had his eyes locked on me. They showed a glint of dark amusement as they watched me. There is no shame in survival, Leo, no shame at all, Scar said when I reached the wildebeest. He would know, wouldn't he? How long had he endured humiliation while living under Mufasa's rule? But eventually his time came, just like mine would. I stared back at him with no emotion on my face, but in my mind, I was already envisioning tearing him apart, limb by limb. It was not so much for hate or revenge. I would kill him because that's how it has to be. But that was still far into the future. For now, I sank my teeth into the meat and tore away huge portions. I let him feed his own downfall. I adapted fast to the new king and easily bent the knee. On the other hand, it took over a month until the rest of the pride completely submitted to Scar. It was a slow collapse. I was glad that I left early because a whole month was a big portion of a lion's relatively short lifespan. I'd have wasted that for nothing if I followed my mother. Finally, things were settling, and our new way of life was starting to become stable. A few of the lionesses even gave themselves to Scar, and the king was in full mating mode to create his bloodline. You could say he was distracted for the time being, and that gave me the time and freedom I needed to grow stronger. The hyenas grew bolder. They wandered through Pride Rock like they owned the place, laughing with open jaws and brushing shoulders with those who once hunted them like prey. They pushed boundaries. Sometimes they tried to play with Nala and Zuri or even nip at the lionesses to provoke a reaction. Scar kept them in check, but barely. It was enough to keep order, but not enough to offer dignity to the pride. As for me, I kept to myself. After the struggle had passed, Scar's rule proved to be quite beneficial for me. Unlike Mufasa, who respected all animals and preached the circle of life, Scar told us that everything was for the strong to take. That meant we always had food on the table. We had more food than we could eat. This was extremely good for me, and the change in diet was quick to show even after only a month. At the same time, I also changed things about myself. I was not just eating and sleeping to grow anymore. I was training and exploring whenever I had the chance. Coupled with the fact that I had freedom, I was allowed to realize and grow to my full potential. Let's talk more about my training. The concept of training itself was unthinkable for any animal in the world. Why the heck would anyone tire themselves out and do unnecessary labor? The focus of every animal was simply to survive and thrive. But I could see beyond that, especially when life was so easy under Scar's rule. I trained my body in all imaginable ways. I would climb trees over and over again, jump on top of rocks, or run miles upon miles for no real reason to an outsider's perspective. Only I knew the reason behind all of it. Although one thing became clear after training myself and knowing the exact physical stats of my body. My lack of tail was becoming a huge problem. The larger I grew, the need for balance became more and more vital. And without a tail, it was hard to do that. I couldn't make tight turns while sprinting, I was having difficulties maintaining my top speed, and it was hard to balance while leaping from place to place. It also had minor effects on many of my other physical abilities. The lack of tail was a clear disability, and I realized quite early on that I was going to be a shitty lion when I grew up. Well, as long as I didn't do anything about it at least. But you better bet your life that I was going to do something about it. But what, was the question. I spent nights pondering over it. I would think of endless ways to compensate for what I didn't have. Until eventually, my persistence bore fruit and I was enlightened. And you would never guess from where I got my new perspective and idea. That's right, I got it from observing the ugly hyenas. Shit. I cursed out loud after I slipped while making a turn to follow my prey. I stumbled onto the dirt and did a few humiliating flips before I fell. I was 9 months old, and I was already struggling to make turns while I was at top speed. It was absolutely frustrating and ridiculous. What would happen when I got faster? Would I not be able to handle my own speed? I gazed at the other lionesses as they chased after the same prey, but without falling like me. Their tails looked like they were another living being as it shifted and coiled to counterbalance them with every turn. How can I do the same thing without a tail? I asked myself once more, but just like every other time I asked myself this question, my mind couldn't come up with an answer. I sighed and sat on the ground. I continued watching as the others tried to bring down the prey. But while they were doing that, my eyes shifted from the hunters and fell on the hyenas. What the? I was perplexed by what I saw. Believe it or not, behind the hunters were hyenas, and they were somehow keeping up with the speed of the lions. No, not just that, they were actually making tighter and easier turns than the lions themselves. And they had no tail. I was completely baffled. I never noticed it before, but somehow, they were doing the same thing the lions were doing, but without a tail. That was a clear indicator that it was possible to run fast and make sharp turns without having a tail. The scene sparked a new hope in my heart. But how? How do they do it? The answer came fast. It was because they were not like lions. Their body was built differently, so they used other techniques and other methods to achieve the same thing compared to the lions. And then it hit. Without a tail, was I even a lion? The answer came fast once more. No. I was not a lion, at least not in the traditional and physical sense. Without a tail, I was a completely different beast, one that was unique from everyone else. So then what the hell was I doing trying to learn how to do things like lions do? Why was I imitating their running when I knew full well I was no longer built like them? And what the heck is a lion? It was not a way of running, a way of hunting, nor was it a way of being. A lion is a species. I could still be a lion and do things differently. I see, so that's where I went wrong, I said and then laughed like crazy. A lion's cub natural instinct was to watch and imitate their parents to learn. But I threw away that instinct as they no longer worked for me. Instead, I started learning things on my own, completely from scratch. I was no longer imitating anyone. Instead, I was studying everyone. And that changed literally everything. For the next 3 months, I spent most of my free time developing my own way of doing things. I relearned how to do almost every action, be it walking, running, climbing, jumping, etc. For example, I was no longer running like most lions do. My feet were placed slightly wider than they should be, which made my center of gravity lower than other lions when running. I noticed that the lower center of gravity was what enabled hyenas to make tight turns without a tail. My wider stance also enabled me to keep balance better than ever, even without a tail. It was not noticeable. No one would be able to tell apart my running style from other lions until they took a much closer look. But these seemingly subtle change in details were what made all the difference. I invented these techniques, taking inspiration from the other animals around me. I learned from everyone, be it the small warthog that could run unbelievably fast for its small stature, the buffalo that carries their humongous weight, or the hyenas with their ability to make sharp turns. I took small attributes from these animals, and I was creating my own style and technique that was unique only to me. Or was it really unique to me? Perhaps I was reinventing a forgotten style of action. Saber-toothed tigers were a thing of the past, but they lived at one point in the same type of land that lions do. They were also one of the few big cats without a long tail, just like me. Perhaps if those prehistoric predators were still alive, they would move and hunt just like me. I created the techniques, and in the span of 3 months, those movements and behaviors were the new normal. And finally, I was able to perform at a similar level to the other lions. Yet that was not the end. The best part came after I turned 1 year old. That was when a cub enters its growth stage. It was akin to the explosive body development a human teenager would experience. With my intense training and nigh unlimited source of protein and food, my body went through a complete metamorphosis. Instead of my techniques adapting to my body started adapting to them. The advantage of losing my tail so early in my life showed its advantage. It was akin to someone who lost one arm and gained insane strength on the remaining arm. I did not know how much my body changed as I grew or which part of me was different from other lions. The only thing I knew was the visible difference I had compared to the other lions. I grew wider, my shoulder muscles started to develop more than what they were supposed to. This made it so that I naturally had wider space between my legs even without trying. My hind legs grew extremely large and powerful. This made me lose a bit of that feline shape and instead, I was larger and bulkier. Not just in appearance, but in performance as well. I could jump higher than any other lioness in the pride. My forelimbs grew larger and my paws were even bigger. At my young age, I already had bigger paws than the average lioness. I guess this was likely due to my need to balance. More surface area means more stable balance, right? But even still, my changes were not too obvious to raise an eyebrow. I was living in my body, so I noticed, but others wouldn't. To them, I was simply growing bigger and bigger at an almost alarming rate. My growth got to the point that I caught the eyes of Scar again. He would look at me with measuring eyes instead of mocking ones. His gaze would linger on my form as if to assess my power. But it was still not enough to make him act. I was not the only one growing as well, since Scar had grown much larger than before. His skinny frame was finally filled with meat due to the abundance of food, and he was now slightly larger than Mufasa was in his prime. His confidence was at an all-time high. In the meantime, I continued growing. I continued forging myself to be exactly what I wanted to be. Not a perfect lion, but the strongest one. 1 year and 5 months old, under the morning sun and hidden amid the grass were two predators crouching low. They were stalking a springbuck that had wandered a little too far from the grazing herd. Sight, scent, and sound, Sarabi whispered into Leo's ears. That's how they'll know you're coming. Eliminate two at all times. This was the very first time that she was teaching him to hunt. The other two cubs, Nala and Zuri, were already taught how to hunt, and Leo was the last priority in her mind. She felt this way because her relationship with Leo had been strained ever since Scar became king, and she didn't think it would be worth her time to teach a male, one without a tail at that. Food was also abundant, and Scar was using the strategy of surrounding prey with his overwhelming number of hyenas. Therefore, it was not really required for the pride to hunt anymore. But in the end, she decided to take him out for at least one hunt. She'd admit, she was thoroughly impressed with her son so far. He was doing everything perfectly. Her soft whisper in his ears was more like a reminder than an actual lesson. She could see that Leo already knew how to stalk prey. How he learned that was a question that kept ringing in her mind. He would have become a remarkable hunter just like his dad had it not been for his disability. What a waste of talent, she thought to herself. Leo stayed quiet. His shoulders moved and rolled as he crawled up to his prey. His huge paws barely made a sound even when he stepped on dried grass. There was a slight change in wind direction, so they both paused and crouched even lower than they already were. The springbuck caught their scent and looked in their direction, but it didn't see anything or hear anything. They moved only after the wind changed again and they were stalking downwind. They moved ever so slowly toward the prey, who continued to look at them. But since it didn't hear or smell them, it did not run. As long as you eliminate two senses, the prey would not run. That was the golden rule of stalking prey. Of course, this didn't work on every animal. Take, for example, a rabbit that would run when it felt threatened. Sarabi stepped on a twig, causing it to crack under her weight. They stopped and hid low immediately. The springbuck carefully looked around again before shrugging. It continued grazing and the predators crawled even closer. After a few more seconds of careful stalking, they were close enough to jump out and chase their prey. Sarabi took this moment to test Leo once more. Where do you think it will run? She whispered the question in his ear. Knowing where the prey would run or how it would run was a vital piece of information if you wanted a successful chase. It ensures a slight advantage, which could snowball into a deciding factor. Especially when both animals had similar speeds. Ha! Leo blinked, as if he thought the question was out of place. He turned towards his mother with a questioning tilt of his head. The prey, where do you think it will run? She asked again. Away from me? Leo's answer was so unsure that it came out as a question. Sarabi released a sigh, but there was no disappointment. Leo had done extremely well so far. She should have expected him to be ignorant about some things, even though he was exceptional at stalking. After all, she had not been there to teach him anything. You need to know where your prey will run if you want to catch it, she said in a teaching voice. Look at its right side, the rest of the herd is that way, so it will likely run towards them. Leo followed her line of sight and narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. He was taking apart every teaching and learning as much as he could. They seek safety in numbers, Sarabi said. Now look at the surroundings. Notice the number of trees there. The prey will likely run towards the empty spaces rather than the clustered ones. Are you listening to me, Leo? She asked when she noticed that he was spacing out. He shook his head. Yes. I was just wondering if all that will really be necessary for me. She creased her eyebrow. What do you mean? But then a bird flying overhead spotted them and released a panicked sound before flying away with a loud flap of her wings. The springbuck straightened up, and this time, since they were so close, it spotted them. The prey turned and ran almost immediately. Sarabi clicked her tongue. It seemed like they would have to search for a new target. All their effort was discarded because of one single unaccounted factor. She relaxed her posture, only to tense up again as Leo shot out like a bullet. Her instinct screamed at her. The explosion of raw strength spooked her to the very core. He was a blur beside her. She couldn't believe he was moving that fast. She stood up and watched him as he chased after the prey. On a closer inspection, she realized that he was not fast. Quick would be the better word to describe him. He could not have been faster than her full speed, but what set him apart was his ability to accelerate. At full speed, he was still slower than an experienced hunter like Sarabi. But he was able to go from 0 to top speed almost immediately. He pushed himself off not just with his hind legs but with all of his limbs. He did not gallop to pick up speed like other lions do. His forelegs grabbed the earth together, and he pulled himself forward with raw power. His hind legs worked similarly, and he pushed himself off with staggering force. Even the prey did not have time to reach its top speed. Leo was onto him before it passed the 10-meter mark. What was the use of running fast when you had no time to run fast? Leo swiped his arms at the back leg of the buck. His highly developed shoulder pulled itself, and his swing was able to rip the hooves off the ground easily. The swing was even powerful enough to break the animal's leg. The springbuck fell on the ground, and Leo pounced at it. He clamped down at the neck and, with a trained twist of his head, he broke the neck with a soft crack. He continued biting at the neck while the prey struggled with its final breath. A few seconds later, the springbuck stopped moving and lay dead. On the other hand, Sarabi was completely rooted in her spot. She had never seen Leo in action, so she could not comprehend how he was able to move that fast or kill prey that easily. It was jarring, borderline frightening. Leo? She called him, as if to confirm that the beast in front of her was indeed her son. The one that was just a small cub a year ago. The one she raised. Leo turned back and looked at her with awful awareness in his eyes. There was an unnerving intelligence in the depth of those eyes, one she didn't see even in wise kings like Mufasa. She slowly walked up to him and rubbed her head along his body to show her feelings. Leo welcomed her by replying to her action. His growing mane gently brushed against her. She also realized then that he was already the same size as her, if not heavier. She had not paid attention, but in what felt like a blink of an eye, her son was already grown. "You've grown, my son," she said with mixed emotion. "I'm proud of you." And he grew better than she could ever imagine. So I got love and acknowledgement only when she knew I was strong? Ain't that a bitch? When a mother's love was conditional, you know you live in a brutal world. Not that I care too much. Should we bring the kill back to the pride? I asked Sarabi as she carefully examined the springbuck I had just killed. It was lucky that I caught it before it could run away. A springbuck was one of the most annoying prey to chase down. It was almost impossible to catch them alone when given enough time to run. "No need to bring it back, the pride doesn't need more food," she said and stood there without doing anything. It took me a few seconds to realize she was waiting for something, and a few more to conclude that she was waiting for me to open the kill. "Oh, sorry," I said and went down on the prey to start tearing away at the skin. As I was the one who caught the prey, it was my right to eat first, and only after taking a bite would Sarabi join me. Similar to how Mufasa would take the first bite of the food, I tore open the chest of the corpse and immediately feasted on the juicy organs. The insides were warm and it gave me the same feeling as eating fresh food in my past life. Sarabi cautiously approached the kill, and seeing that I did not reject her, she started eating as well. The springbuck was not a big prey, weighing only around 40 to 50 kilograms on average. I could finish it alone in an hour, so since it was two of us, it was more like a light snack. "It's good to get a new taste for a change. I was getting tired of eating wildebeest," Sarabi said. Scar had broken most of the pride's traditions in his reign. The pride members themselves rarely hunt anymore. Wildebeest were favored prey since they were big and lived in large herds. We would surround 2 or 3 of them with the hyenas and take them down with barely any effort. When it came to feeding time, there was no bonding or eating together. Scar would eat first, and after he was done, the rest of the pride would have a go. Last were the hyenas, and they usually finish everything with no leftovers. Due to this change in diet, most of the animals had grown fatter and larger than ever. For the moment, we were all thriving and living like kings. I couldn't have asked for a better condition to grow up, to be honest. But I knew this wouldn't last long. Soon enough, the prey animals would move due to overhunting, and a drought was coming. For the moment, though, I ate to my heart's content. I had a huge appetite, mostly because I had been eating more than I should ever since I was an infant. Another reason for my huge appetite was that, unlike other lions, I did not just eat and sleep all day. I was constantly training and exploring, which burned as many calories as I ate. There was barely any fat on me, mostly muscle stuck to my frame. We dismantled and devoured the springbuck in less than half an hour. By that point, I was still not full, but we returned to the Pride Rock together. "Thanks for teaching me today," I said as we walked together side by side towards our home. "Don't talk down on me, Leo. There was nothing to be taught," she said while shaking her head. "You already know how to hunt." I did not comment on that, only released a soft hum of acknowledgement. "May I ask where you learn how to do it?" she asked and turned curiously. "Simply by watching and copying," I said. I guess I should have expected that answer. "You were always talented at hunting. You often caught rabbits even as a cub," she said. We went home together but parted ways when the Pride Rock came into view. She went straight towards the den while I walked around, idly searching for more food to fill my endless stomach. But the scent that I found while walking around nearly crushed my appetite. It was a distinctive and familiar scent at this point, but it smelled fouler and fouler as I age. "Scar," I whispered his name as I caught his scent on the trees and bushes. The smell was from him pissing everywhere to mark his territory. I couldn't exactly put it into words, but there was something instinctively offensive about him marking the territory I was also living in. Almost like the smell was calling me a slur. It was a reminder that I was a little bitch in this kingdom. This was proof that I was quickly growing into an adult. It wouldn't be longer until I would have to leave this pride. I don't think I would last another 6 months. The urge to erase his scent and mark the place with my own was almost too much to hold back. But for today, I ignored it and walked away. At that point my eyes caught a few hyenas in the distance eating a prey of their own. They stopped the moment I looked towards them, and they all got up, as bracing for impact. I smiled and headed towards their direction. 6 or 7 of them, I counted in my head as I approached. They were standing in front of their meal, tails upright as if they were ready to protect their food by fighting me. I called their bluff and walked straight towards them. The closer I got, the less confident they seemed to appear. Eventually they moved back and walked away from the food. I peacefully lay down on the ground and ate their food while locking eyes with them. My action seemed to be daring them to do something, but they didn't do anything. They remained docile. For reference, the average hyena was only half my weight. The females were a little bigger than the males, but they were still significantly smaller than me. At my current physical state, I could easily take on 5 hyenas. I had been bullying them every chance I got. Unlike what you would expect, Scar was still a lion. He never took the side of the hyenas when it came to conflict between us. I guess it made sense why they would kill him at the end of the movies. "Why are you just standing there? You got something to say?" I asked the most dominant female among them. She simply sneered but did nothing else. For the next few minutes I ate the parts of the meat I wanted. When the only remaining meat were the tough ones stuck on the bones or the fats, I got up and turned to leave. But not before spraying piss on the food. "Screw them. Leo." Zuri was the first to greet me when I reached the den, like always. The sun was starting to set on the horizon when I reached home. The rest of the pride had gathered. We were a total of 26 members now. 9 adults, 3 teenagers including me, and 14 cubs from 2 different generations. That's a lot of cubs, I know, but like I said, we were thriving. The adults did not have to go out hunting and could protect and nurse the cubs, which resulted in no death among them. Well, except for one which was killed by a hyena. But Scar made an example of that by tearing the culprit into pieces and littering its corpse around the pride rocks so they didn't do it again. Zuri came up to me and rubbed her head on mine. She continued and rubbed my entire length before she leaped in a cutesy, excited way. A childish crush was slowly turning into something close to love for her. And honestly, I greatly appreciated her affection. Especially when I was entering the stage of adulthood and the other females were slowly distancing themselves from me and seeing me as an outsider. Welcome back. Sarabi told us about your successful hunt. We gotta go hunting together too. I also want to see you in action, she said. Sure, if you want, I said while finding my usual spot in the den and laying there. But I'm sure you are already a better hunter than me. Not at all. I still can't catch a springbuck by myself, she said and lay next to me. I really want to see how you do it. I huff at that. I'll have to show you then, and before you come at me, let me just say Zuri is hot. Like legit really hot. A human's sense of attraction was usually only limited to sight, but a lion's was not. A young lioness may be unattractive from a human perspective, but for a young lion like me, she was 10 out of 10. And I was not attracted to her for her appearance, but instead her shape, her scent, and the rhythm of her actions were what made her hot to me. She was the most attractive out of the pride, that I can say. Even Nala could not hold a candle to her in my mind. Speaking of which, where's Nala? Oh, she hasn't returned yet. Maybe she really ran away from the pride this time, Zuri said with a shrug. Nala and I could be placed in the same type of category among the pride. We rarely acted like we were part of it and would spend most of the day doing things by ourselves. We hung around for a while and eventually, the king entered the den. Scar, unlike a year ago, now had a certain presence with him. I guess after being a king for that long, he was picking up some pride and dignity. He came in with a bloody jaw that told us he just enjoyed his meal. There was silence while he took the highest elevation as a place to lay on. After he was seated, some of the lionesses went out of the den to eat the meal he just left behind. Zuri was included among them. I'll see you later, she said and quickly ran out of the den. I merely nodded without answering back. I could feel Scar's gaze on me, a measuring kind of gaze that was unsure if it was right to spare me. You've had your meal, Leo? He asked with a certain edge in his tone. Yes, Your Majesty. I've had my fill for my hunt today. I see, he said with a long pause. Good for you. Eventually he tore his eyes away from me and mounted the lioness that came to him with expectant light in her eyes. I ignored him and closed my eyes to rest my fatigued muscles. I reminded myself how his gaze was intensifying day by day. I could almost taste it. The day I would challenge his authority and be kicked out of the pride. No NTR for Zuri if that worries you. And as Leo grows, his stump tail also still grew so it's like the size of a saber-toothed tiger. Still cover his ass and balls. I walked through the pride lands, the beauty of which never ceased to amaze me. Dry grass brushed against my legs as I moved, brittle stalks whispering with every step. The morning sun was already high, casting a white glow across the savanna. The morning was filled with the song of birds and animals. There was an absence of a mighty roar that would echo when Mufasa was alive. Could you believe that Scar was too lazy to wake up early and patrol his kingdom? He released his roar only in the evening. The earth beneath my paws was cracked and warm, littered with hoof prints and dried dung. It was proof of the life that passed through here before me. It was almost instinct to notice these tracks and follow them. You could never go wrong with following a herd. Who knows, one of them could get injured and fall behind the herd and I might just get a free meal. The wind changed as I walked at a constant pace and I caught the scent of something large. The smell was thick, leathery, and pungent. I turned my head towards the smell and sure enough, I saw two rhinos lumbering beyond the slope in the open plain. I crouched slightly to not be seen. They were not threats, but I didn't want them to see me either. I observed them from a distance. They were gigantic and had horns that still managed to look big in their frame. With their head along with their whole body low and close to the ground, you could tell that they were immovable. Just for reference, currently I am around 130 to 140 kilograms and the rhinos were easily 3 tons. That means they were easily more than 20 times my size. Each step they took left dents in the dirt. Watching them was like watching boulders roll uphill. Solid. Unstoppable. I couldn't even begin to imagine what it would take to bring one of them down. A lion was king of the jungle, but we sure ain't the biggest or the strongest. I moved away from the rhinos after looking at them from a safe distance. The terrain was flattening for a stretch before breaking again into patchy bushes and termite mounds. Some of the mounds rose taller than me, their surfaces riddled with holes. It was a nightmare for people with trypophobia, I'm sure. The faint skittering of insects was audible if I stood still. Simba is probably having those for dinner, I said with a chuckle. I'll admit I kind of miss him and his reckless antics. I hope I see him again in the future. I continued my journey and saw a lone giraffe on the way. The tallest animal was nibbling leaves from a thorny acacia. Its ugly blue tongue ate the leaves without being pricked by the thorns. It was an interesting sight. I feel like I would have a greater chance taking down a giraffe than a rhino. Or maybe that's just me underestimating the giraffe because it has such a long neck and therefore bigger target. Nevertheless, I knew my chance of taking either of them down was nearly in the negatives, for now. In the future though, if hairless monkeys could take down larger prey, then I was determined to take them down also. A pebble rolled beneath my paw, and I glanced down to see a trail of ants walking in line on the uneven ground. I also noticed a beetle rolling a dung ball with comical determination, pivoting, adjusting, nudging and never stopping. It was almost inspiring, in a strange way. Every creature here had a job, a role, even if no one was watching. The grass grew denser and taller again as I continued my exploration. I had to part it with my head as I pushed forward. I could hear the sharp shrill of cicadas hidden somewhere among the stalks. Tiny grasshoppers leapt out of my way, some brushing past my legs, others vanishing before I could spot them. The terrain was never the same for long. It was incredible how diverse the Pride Land was, to the point it was fantastical. I followed a familiar path worn into the land made by hooves. The smell of water pulled me forward. It wasn't fresh, not exactly, but I could hear that it was full of life. My sharp hearing already told me every creature that was in the watering hole before I even saw them. When I reached the watering hole, the air shifted. It was humid here, filled with a thick scent of mud and algae. My eyes immediately locked on a crocodile that lay half buried in muck and under the sun. I paused for a bit because it was the only animal I didn't expect. It was not making any sound after all. I looked away after a while and gave attention to the family of impalas that stood at the opposite end. One stepped forward, dipped its head, hesitated and then drank the water. The others followed the brave one. I also leaned down and took a few sips to quench my budding thirst. It never hurt to drink more water. I didn't stay long in the watering hole. The sun was climbing, and I wanted to cover more ground. As I walked, the land opened up again, sloping downward into a shallow valley. Here the grasses were shorter, greener, perhaps they were fed by an underground stream. I didn't want to dig just to find out. A few trees dotted the slope, some twisted with age, others broken by elephants. One had scratch marks on its bark, claw marks to be exact. It was small, so perhaps it was a leopard. I went to the tree to examine it properly, and that was when I caught a familiar scent on the tree. A smell I couldn't possibly forget. Oh, I paused and then grinned. I guess I know what I am going to hunt today. 3 days later. There you are. There you are. I remember you. How could I possibly forget when you've carved an eternal reminder on me? Hello, I whispered under my breath as my eyes locked onto the kitty cat lying down in the clearing. It was a leopard, to be exact. One with a distinctive scar on his eyes and a familiar scent on his body. It took 3 days to track it down. Suffice it to say, I had underestimated how difficult it would be to track a leopard. But I never gave up out of pure hatred and grudge. And now here I am. I finally found him. I was in the middle of stalking him and I had been successful so far. He was lying under the shade of a tree, cooling himself down after what I assumed was a failed hunt with how rough his breathing was, and there was no meal in front of him. I slowly crawled up to him as stealthily as I could. You'd be surprised how close I managed to get before he spotted me. Clearly a predator was not used to being the hunted one. Eventually, he caught my scent in the wind and he quickly turned towards me. Eyes and ears forward, and both senses spotted me almost immediately, but by that point, I had already exploded out like a ferocious beast. My 4 limbs worked together to push me to my top speed in just a couple of seconds. My size, my build and my technique, all of them were refined and forged to make me the perfect ambush predator. I wasted no time in lunging at my prey. Much to my delight, The leopard decided to climb up the tree instead of running away. He might have a chance if he ran, but his fate was sealed the moment he decided to climb onto the small tree. I didn't follow him up the tree. Instead, my powerful hind legs pushed me up into the air. Muscles that had to make up for the loss of tail were bigger and more powerful than they were supposed to be. I was able to leap 20 feet in the air with ease, and I grabbed the leopard right off the safety of the branch. He crashed onto the ground with a thud. Air was knocked out of his lungs, causing him to writhe and gasp on the ground without moving. I capitalized on that chance and pushed him down on the ground. My claws anchored onto his flesh and a low rumbling growl rolled off my throat. "We meet again, pussy," I said. "You!" He cried and tried to claw me, but his attacks had no effect on me. Similar to how mine had no effect on him a year ago. "Remember my promise?" I asked, and he replied by releasing wild, angry sounds of a cat. "With this, I finish what was left undone," I said, and put weight on my paws. His ribs caved in, and I opened my jaw and clamped down on his neck. After one brutal pull, his neck broke and he stopped moving. Day by day, I got better at taking lives. Third POV. The morning sun slid over the Pride Lands like a blade, slicing through the mist and heat with indifferent precision. Scar, the king of the land, stood atop Pride Rock and surveyed all that lay before him. A land that was his. It was one of the rare mornings when he woke up early to patrol his kingdom. The height he was standing on allowed him to see the herds of animals in the distance. The lush green of trees and bushes. The abundant water in the watering hole and all the creatures that thrived around it. Indeed, the king was pleased with what he saw. Scar looked back to glance at his pride of lions that stretched lazily across the sun-baked stone. He saw that they were well-fed, healthy, and most of them had become loyal to him due to the ease and pleasure they had under his rule. He then turned towards the hyenas that were staying around Pride Rock. They were chaotic creatures, and Scar would be honest when he said he was disgusted by them. But they had their use and they were loyal, so he kept them around. It had taken time, blood, and careful calculation. But the reward was worth it. There was a sense of peace and stability. Scar was living his dream. He was in his prime, and his authority was unchallenged in his kingdom. It was almost perfect. Almost. "Where are you, I wonder?" Scar whispered thoughtfully in the wind as he gazed into the horizon. There was one flaw in his near-perfect world. A flaw that was beginning to grow into this huge imperfection that he never expected. He kept an eye on it, but now that it had disappeared for 3 days, Scar was beginning to grow concerned and cautious. Leo, the crippled one. Born weak in the shadow of a fated prince, nature had not been kind to him. Even before he turned half a year, he was forced to fight for the right to live and barely survived as a cripple. Scar also robbed him of his father's guidance, his brother's company, his mother's affection, and his budding pride. At that point, Scar thought the cub was just a pile of scars still living. A pitiful thing, really. He'd seen cubs dealt better cards in life and still die. Nature had a rhythm. The weak were swept away so the strong could rise. Except he didn't die. He grew. Slowly. Quietly. Unnoticed at first. But he grew. He learned to fight with his hips low and shoulders heavy. He learned to leap without a tail, adapted like something primal, like a beast meant to survive a world with no rules. Scar was wrong, Leo was strong, and so he rose from weakness, even his own. Through everything life threw at him, he seemed to walk out stronger. Now, a year and a half in this world, and he was already the size of an adult lioness when it should have taken him twice that time. Leo was stronger than he had any right to be. And clever, Scar noticed, and this was what scared him the most. Eyes too sharp for a cub. Actions that smelled of a plan, even small ones, movements too sometimes deliberate, etc. And now he was gone. 3 days. No word. No scent trail returning. But he would come back. That was the kind of cub he was. Stubborn. Proud. A thorn. And thorns have a way of digging deep when ignored. Scar knew this. He knew this better than anyone, for he was once the same thorn to Mufasa. He was secretly worried. Perhaps it was the wrong decision to spare him. Scar spared him out of petty goodwill and so that Sarabi would not remain too stubborn for him to conquer. He thought Leo was not a threat back then. That was a grave oversight on his part. If Scar allowed him to grow further, Leo could prove to be his worst enemy. Not now though, he was still too green to be considered a real threat now. But in a few more moons, a few more battles, that would change. He already had a following among the younger ones, even if they didn't realize it. The way they mimicked him, the way they looked up to him like he was better than a perfect royal breed like Scar himself. It's dangerous, Scar said thoughtfully. But for now, Scar watched and waited. He did everything to attain the power he had, and he was willing to do more to keep his power. The sun continued its great climb in the sky, and during his thoughts, it had already climbed halfway. At that moment, Scar caught a distinctive scent in the air. The smell of a lion, a half-grown king, a halfway threat. Leo. Speak of the devil, Scar said and watched as Leo came closer and closer from the horizon. He saw that Leo was carrying a fresh prey in his jaw and that made his blood boil. He was not hungry, but he immediately ran down Pride Rock and headed towards Leo. When he reached him, Scar did not say a greeting. Instead, he attacked Leo immediately. The young adult was caught completely off guard and fought back on instinct, but only for a brief moment. Roar. A chain of thunderous roars followed powerful movements. The ground came alive in dust and the rest of the pride stood up to watch the scene. It was only a few seconds of intense actions before Leo stopped fighting back and became submissive. Scar bared his teeth and quickly snatched the prey from Leo's grasp. Know your place, cub. Scar roared and stood on the stolen prey. Leo took a step back. His eyes locked on Scar with an eerie glow. Scar was expecting primal anger, but what he saw was something unexpected. There was anger and rage in his eyes, but what Scar noticed was those emotions being held back by an unnatural clarity. Like Leo was not really taking offense because he knew he would get his revenge in the end. Scar once looked at Mufasa with the same eyes, so they felt vaguely familiar to him. If lions had mirrors, he would undoubtedly try and kill Leo on the spot. Instead, Scar took a bite of the prey in front of Leo. He was not hungry, but it was a show of dominance. You disappear for days without notifying me, and you think you can walk right back to the pride like you own it? Scar said. I apologize, Your Majesty, Leo said in a respectful tone. But if eyes could speak, he would say the opposite. You know I never brought home my prey. The one that you are eating, I brought as an apology, Leo said. And now Scar was left dumbfounded. He had already eaten the prey, so it was as if he had already accepted the apology when taken into account body language. In the end, what else could he do except say never do it again, Leo, always inform your king. You should not make moves without the king's permission. I'll remember it, Leo said and then walked past him. For some reason, that felt insulting to Scar. That was proof that Leo was everything Scar was thinking him to be. Bold, stubborn, and clever. First POV, goddamn, I truly was not made to be the submissive lion. I nearly lost control and fought against Scar for dominance when he tried to steal my prey. It took everything, and I meant everything, to hold myself back from ripping him up. I had a lesser chance at winning the fight, but I sure as hell was strong enough to hurt him badly now. Inner peace, I chanted silently while making my way up the Pride Rock and towards the den. What the heck are you looking at? I said and smacked a hyena that did not have the survival instinct to move away when I got there. He released strangled puppy cries and writhed on the ground. That made me feel a little better. Screw them. I climbed up the rocky path and went into the den. Immediately, I was greeted by silent judging eyes due to what had just taken place. But before I could feel awkward and unwelcome, Zuri hopped towards me playfully. She gave me a sweet-eye smile and rubbed her head against me to show affection. I closed my eyes and released a pleased groan. Although I am thankful for your return, it was quite mean to disappear like that, Zuri said while leading me towards my usual spot. Something came up that required my attention, I said and lay down. My tired muscles groaned from all the training and journeys as I relaxed. She sat down beside me, showering me with the attention that none of the Pride members were giving me these days. It was understandable, I was growing too big, too fast. All of them knew that showing too much affection to me could earn the king's distaste. I was bringing home a reed buck, but as you saw, the king stole it from me, I said. Reed buck? Zuri asked with a tilt of her head. Yes, it's your favorite, I said with a small grumble of dissatisfaction. She paused, clearly taken aback that I was bringing home prey for her. She seemed happy, even though I failed to give her the food. But she didn't express her happiness in words. Instead, she showed it through her actions. Her warm tongue brushed against my face before she started grooming my growing mane. I leaned into her as she cleaned every part of my fur. I tried to return the favor, but she was extremely clean already, so I was just doing it for the formalities. She licked the dried blood on my jaw and then pulled back with a smile. "I can taste it, it's delicious," she said. I sucked in a deep breath and looked away with a grunt. I couldn't believe that actually made me blush. Zuri was definitely one of a kind. Lucky for me, Sarabi came towards me right then and lay beside me. She started rubbing her head and grooming me as well, seemingly not wanting to be outdone by Zuri. After disappearing for 3 days, the three of us bonded and showed affection with each other. These types of things were important for the pride. It was what kept us together. Leo. Nala ran into the den with joyful strides and slid to a stop in front of me. She had been staying outside and looking at the king, it seemed. She said, "You should have seen the king's face, ha. It's amazing that you stand up to him. You should do it more often." "Don't give such ill advice, Nala, he could have gotten himself killed," Sarabi said with a sigh, already accustomed to how Nala was and how she always rebelled against the king. "No way, Scar can't kill Leo, he is too strong now," Nala said, but Sarabi's glare made her pause. "I mean the king shouldn't be able to kill Leo even if he tried." "You are underestimating the king too much, Nala," Sarabi said. Nala rolled her eyes in return and pushed herself between the three of us. She cuddled against our bodies and said, "Whatever, he didn't even fight against King Mufasa." "Is that why you refused to accept him as the king?" Zuri asked with a tilt of her head. "Kind of. How can you call yourself king when you don't even earn it?" she said. "You are talking too loud, someone might hear you," I warned with a chuckle. I completely agreed with her statement, though. "Whatever," was her reply as she licked her own paws to clean herself. I spent the rest of the day bonding with the pride and relaxing for a little bit. That didn't mean the day was wasted, though. A wise man once said that rest day was also growth day because you grow during your rest. The next day, the morning wind tasted cool on my tongue. It was not exactly sharp like dawn, but still heavy with the chill of night. I padded over the baked ground, my paws brushing through the short, dew-slick grass before I came to a stop on a slight rise overlooking the watering hole. The sun had barely lifted itself above the acacia line, its light turning everything gold. Even the flies seemed slower this early. Below me, life had gathered like it always did when water was near. Impala crowded near the edge, drinking in quick, jerky movements. Zebras stood further back, watching everything with twitching ears. Warthogs rooted in the mud while a pair of lanky storks stood nearby like silent guards. Even a few baboons perched in the nearby trees, arguing loudly over nothing. The grass here was greener than most places, thicker too. The rains had been generous, and it showed. Everything felt fuller, from the bellies of the prey to the buzz in the air. My eyes fell on the 3 crocodiles that lay nearby. They were basking on the far bank with their jaws open. A few birds were actually inside their open jaws, cleaning their teeth of rotting flesh. I was sure more crocodiles were inside the lake as well. The other animals knew it too, but the savannah made them choose between fear and thirst. I wasn't hiding. A few animals glanced my way, froze, then went back to their business when they realized I wasn't hunting them. When you saw a predator, it usually meant you were not their target. I walked towards the watering hole. I leaned down to take a few drinks before I decided to jump into the lake to go for a swim. Usually, big cats like lions did not like swimming. But as a previous human, I actually loved it. "So cool and refreshing," I said while splashing around the water. I always felt much cleaner after swimming than when we groomed each other. I felt some movements in the water, probably some crocodiles, but I was not too worried about them. They didn't see lions as prey, so they usually just ignored me whenever I came for a swim. And I've often come, so they've got used to my presence at this point. Swimming in the lake was not only refreshing, but it was also a full-body workout. I usually leave the water with sore muscles, which is good. I stayed in the water for nearly half an hour, swimming around and playing to my heart's content. Then my instinct told me that something was amiss. Immediately my eyes became razor-focused and I looked around the water. I saw a crocodile swimming towards me. Only the head was visible above the water, but I clearly felt the movement it made through the liquid. My first reaction was to focus on the crocodile while swimming back to the shore. This never happened before, but I knew how unpredictable nature could be. My fear came true as the croc lunged violently at me when it got close. But fortunately for me, by that point I was in the shallow part of the water with my feet touching muddy ground. The crocodile was also fairly small. It was young and inexperienced, which was exactly why it had decided to attack me. One of the most powerful jaws in nature clamped down on my left paw as I swiped at it on instinct. I felt a tiny ache, but nothing too severe. The crocodile was not big enough to have that powerful bite that they were known for. "You chose the wrong cat to bite, lizard," I said while pulling it ashore with me. The crocodile refused to let go, but that was better for me. It struggled for a bit, but since my feet were on the ground, I was able to drag it to the bank with ease. When we were washed up on land, it was already over for him. The crocodile tried to do its death roll, but I stopped him after one rotation. I clawed at its open belly, which was softer than the armored back. I released a growl and tore open the lizard. When it was ashore, I saw that it was only around 7 feet or so. Quite small compared to the 15 to 16 feet behemoth that I saw basking in the sun. In just a few moments, I killed the unfortunate crocodile. I tried eating it, but the taste was really not to my liking, so I left it there. I washed the blood in the lake before I left. I did not want to go back into the water after what happened. The crocodile that I killed was also eaten by its own kind a few minutes after I left. Today marked a very unique and rare experience for me. But after what happened, forget attacking, Northwest other crocodiles came close to me again.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.